Hello, Mr. Councillor Thomsville here. May I nominate a chair for the meeting, please? I'd like to nominate Stephen Marshall.
Yeah, I'll second that, Councillor Sulla.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, I believe that's been good. That's fine. Thank you all. Yep, I'm happy to share. So thank you for obviously that nomination and for today's meeting, that of being a scrutiny for partnerships. So I got to open the meeting just to remind members of expectations and the rules, and just for the public watching. So this scrutiny committee meeting is being conducted remotely in accordance with the coronavirus regulations and the remote meetings protocol agreed by the council, which will operate alongside the council standing orders to ensure that we continue to take democratic decisions in an open and transparent manner. I would remind members that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Can I request that you all switch off your cameras and mute your microphones when you are not speaking to ensure that there's no unnecessary background noise and to help with the audio and visual quality of the broadcast. The council standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times during this virtual meeting in the same way as ordinary meetings, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. Can I also remind members to ensure their chat function is switched on and to use that facility to indicate to me when they wish to speak on a particular item. Please do not speak until I invite you to do so, and remember to unmute your microphone and switch your camera on. And for the benefit of everyone watching on the live stream, when I invite members to cast their votes, I don't believe that's applicable on this one, but they will do so electronically using the voting facility in the chat function. And then if anything, obviously that would be made public. As well as being broadcast live, a recorded version of this remote meeting will be uploaded onto the council website for public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting, and Welsh translation of the proceedings can be provided upon request. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the council. And I go on to the agenda. So can I start off with any apologies there, please, Neil?
Apologies for today, Chair, Councillors Clark and Spencer.
That's great. And any others that members have received?
No.
No, thank you, everyone. And is there any declarations of interest, please?
No, Chair. Thank you.
It is a note, thank you. And if I can start off then with the first report there, the One Newport Wellbeing Plan 2021-2022, and that's quarter two performance. Tracy, are you going to be introducing this in for us today?
Hello, Chair. I'm going to ask Will Beer from Public Health Wales to introduce, because unfortunately we got apologies from the leader, so Rhys is here to cover the council, but Will is going to introduce and will then hand over to partners for the relevant sections.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So at the Scrutiny Committee, you are receiving the quarter two report against the One Newport Wellbeing Plan, and this is a representation of progress that's been made against the key steps in the 5 cross-cutting interventions that make up the Wellbeing Plan. And as you know, these are based on the wellbeing objectives that have been agreed by all partners based on the initial assessment of well-being across the city. And just to remind members that this reflects the work that we are doing in partnership rather than within our own constituent organisations. So this is really about the collaborative advantage we have by working together and working in a more integrated way. It's also worth noting that this report, which covers the period of April to September 2021, represents the period of time where the Newport PSB was sitting, and that since and Newport PSB was a statutory body, but since then the Gwent PSB has been formed. So there's now a local wellbeing delivery group that sits under that newly formed Gwent PSB, which was set up at the end of this reporting period, so from the beginning of October, and will continue to oversee and deliver the wellbeing plan until April 2023. I understand that Tracy spoke to members, I think back on the 20th of January, about the forthcoming wellbeing assessment and the steps that will be involved in developing the new wellbeing plan from April 2023. and I think she explained a bit more about the governance that sits around the newly formed Gwent PSB. So moving on then to introductions, Chair, we have Nicola Dance, so I'm sure you all know, who'll be talking to you about the progress for that period against the Newport offer. Steve Tiley is going to talk about right skills. Steve Morgan is going to talk about safe and green spaces. I'll give the update on strong and resilient communities, and then Craig Lane will talk to you about sustainable travel. So if you're content with that, Chair, we'll kick off with the first presentation, and you'll see there's a dashboard for each of these cross-cutting interventions in the meeting pack today, so we can refer to those as we go along. I think the batting order starts with Nicola, Chair.
Yep, that's brilliant. Thank you, and also for the context identifying about the Gwent level and where we stand as well. So yeah, if you want to come in, Nicola, thank you.
Good evening, Chair and members. I'm here for the leader today. The leader is the lead for the Newport offer alongside Steve Ward of Newport Live, but unfortunately she's unable to attend. So I'm going to just stand in and run through the Newport offer dashboard for you. Just to explain a little bit about the Newport offer to start with. The Newport offer is about Newport being a place where people choose to live, choose to visit, choose to work, and choose to study. And there is a recognition that really the Newport offer is kind of this sort of overarching intervention of the wellbeing plan, which brings together the work of all the other interventions. Because the Newport project, what makes Newport a good place to live, is really based on the projects and the work delivered by the other interventions. So to reflect that, the Newport Offer Board has amongst its membership the leads of the 4 other interventions that you'll hear about this evening. It also has in its membership Newport Now, represented by Kevin Ward, and that's to ensure that there is a local business perspective brought into the board's work. Most importantly, that the leads were really keen that Newport Youth Council should be a member, understanding that really hearing the views of young people is important to making sure that what is delivered has a long-term focus and a long-term sustainability that means that those young people can make decisions about their own needs as well as meeting the needs of today. So it's a really important part of the membership of the Newport offer. So that the dashboard talks about some of the key regeneration projects in the city, and particularly in the city centre. So those are all really important for Newport as a place to live, to work, to visit and to learn. A lot of these are led by Newport City Council, but many of them involve partners collaborating with each other and with the private sector to bring together regeneration and redevelopment schemes that prevent decline and support the long-term vitality and growth of the city, in particular the city centre. And so obviously you see that in the development of new destinations like the Market Arcade and Newport Market, but also the creation of new homes, including shared ownership homes in Olympia House and new homes at Castle View and Upper Dock Street. So there's a range of housing at different price brackets, different levels of affordability, creation of new space. Obviously, we're familiar with the high-grade Mill Street development, and also the creation of sort of creative and digital business startups in the within the new Tramshed tech development in the old railway station building. And then a really important part of the work is also green space. So there's a strong link here with the Green and Safe Spaces intervention, looking for new opportunities to develop green infrastructure and nature-based solutions in the city centre to improve the general environment. Obviously, the key developments going forward for the city centre are the work that brings together the council and Newport Live and Coleg Went in creating two new state-of-the-art buildings in the city centre, in the Wellbeing Centre, and also the new Coleg Went campus. And they integrate both economic well-being and social well-being, and also environmental well-being, because it's obviously about the health benefits of the leisure centre, but also job creation, skills development through Coleg Went, but also linking that up with active travel routes, public transport in the city centre to maximise the health benefits and improvements to air quality. So that's a really good example of where all the 5 interventions come together to deliver something for the Newport offer and for life in the city. So also in terms of the city centre, just the general day-to-day experience of what it's like to be in the city centre. So there's work through the Safer City Centre group that reports into Safer Newport, but also supports Newport offer work in terms of tackling antisocial behaviour, problematic premises, waste accumulations, and all those things that are important to our general day-to-day experience of the city centre. And the work is going a stage further in terms of collaboration with the police and the council and Newport Now, putting in an application to retain purple flag status, which is about making sure that the evening economy flourishes, that there aren't any problems associated with it, identifying areas for improvement, and then that also is a stimulus for potential long-term investment in the city centre. So that application has just gone in from the partners working together. The dashboard also talks about the tourism economy. And obviously that was a sector of the city economy that was growing very rapidly before the pandemic, but was hit very hard. But now work is beginning to make the most of that again, and trying to build up to where we were before. So lots of investment, obviously through the Transporter Bridge work, but also with partners putting on events such as the marathon, the private sector investing in the Mercure Hotel in the city centre, but also in terms of promotion. So much work with Visit Wales and Welsh Government, and with other local authorities in South Wales, and our own sort of attractions in the city, such as the National Trust and the RSPB, to promote Newport, to jointly promote Newport and collaborate. And that included work on the destination website that's been revamped, particularly in the build up to putting in the City of Culture bid, new sort of improving the website with work about what the city's cultural vision is, and recognising all the support that's come from partners and also from community organisations to develop a strategy, a cultural strategy for the city. And then lastly, the board talks about climate change mitigations, and the Newport Offer Board has a subgroup, which is a climate change subgroup, and that brings partners together to look at ways that they can align their work in terms of carbon reduction and support the work with the City Council's own climate change action plan, so the two are aligned. Performance measures, you can see that there's a note there that they're being developed. Some work has been done on that since the dashboard was produced. So performance measures are now agreed, and some of them relate to economic indicators such as job creation, number of business startups, tourism statistics, but a lot of them are about public perception of the city, because a lot of the Newport offer work is about changing perceptions. How do people feel about Newport as a place to live? Is it getting better? Are people proud to say they're coming from Newport? So the new measures reflect that, and we'll be doing some survey work to establish that baseline. So that's it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that update, Nicola, as well, and introduction. I believe Tom, yeah, Councillor Suller.
Thank you, Chair. It's wonderful to have a city like Newport, right? But at the moment, as you know, Nicola, it's down in the dumps at the moment, and we need a diverse economy in there. We know that. Now, are there any businessmen or people come to the PSB and said we want to be into Newport? Because that's most important, isn't it, to get the economy going in there?
Well, there are inquiries that come into the council in terms of inward investment, and there is work through the Newport offer with Newport Now, and there are links with other groups such as the Newport Economic Network, but in terms of direct inquiries, we don't hear of those through the Newport offer board, but obviously they do come in and they're responded to by the inward investment team of the council.
So for the future, we're looking rosy, are we? Do you think we're looking rosy, Nicola?
Well, there's certainly ambition to pull lots of different projects together and have a strong mixed offer in the city centre and across Newport generally, obviously.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, I can see Kevin, if you want to come in, please, Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Nicola. For me, there's sometimes looking at it, and you spoke very well in fairness, Nicola. But for me at the moment, it just seems to be two perceptions of the city centre, and that's like the council's perception of it and the general public's. Because I mean, if you read, for example, social media, which does, whatever way you look at it, it does play an integral role in what we do in day to day, for the good and the bad, actually. But I'm looking, I often read people who are well-known traders within the city centre, particularly in the independent quarter. And if you were to read theirs in isolation, it's not a great place to be. And I have to say that I'm not speaking on their behalf, but I'm speaking on reading what they put out there, that they don't seem an happy bunch. Albeit we can see that there is a lot of activity and development within the city centre, but then that lies uncomfortably next to the fact, and statistically wise, we all saw it the other week, whereby we have the most empty retail units in Great Britain. That could be kind of depressing. And what's the answer? I mean, obviously the council certainly making the right noises, and obviously there's work going on in the background which a lot of people won't know of. And I just think we need, there's like I say, the two sides, maybe they need to come together. Why aren't we, for example, as a local authority, inviting these detractors is probably too harsh a word for these people that speak on social media platforms. I wouldn't call them detractors, but they seem down. They offer, because people do challenge them, obviously, but most of the things that they have to say about the city centre are negative, where I'd like to see some positive in there. Because like I say, on the face of it, there is developments going on, you know, there is building, we see it with our own eyes, and it is quite impressive. But then we have to acknowledge also that people have got a dark view of the city centre as well. And for us, I suppose it's about managing that, bringing people into the conversation. The market, for example, looks fantastic, but there was, as you know, recently in particular, that there was a lot of personal battles there with traders and whatnot. A lot voted with their feet. A lot of people weren't happy, but it was always a cloudy picture posted onto social media. And I just thought, if it was a clearer picture, people can make their minds up, albeit the proof will be in the pudding ultimately. But I just think there's some, I just wanted to put some points in there for to be looked at and thought about. Thanks for listening.
Just to say that, as well as you've got the aim of the Newport offer is not just to create a place where people choose to live, work, and study, and visit. It is about it's about certainly about changing perceptions, but it's also about promoting the good news stories about the city that come from the work of the partnership, come from the work of individual partners, but also from within the community. And I think what the Newport offer would like to do is bring those stories to the fore, particularly those from within the community of Newport.
It's like just as an add-on to what I was just saying there, it seems to me like there's a nervy feel. Build it, they will come. That's a famous saying. But if we could just get a few of these boarded up places out and people rent them, will it kind of create a domino effect? It'd be fabulous to think about that, but there's a reason why it isn't happening. Why are people so much put off Newport? Why are traders within the city centre so negative? I think that's a biggie, actually. And why are people in our wards, why are they choosing to go to Cardiff? Why are they choosing to go to Cwmbran? A lot of people say it's free parking. I don't quite buy that, although I take their point. But they're the type of things I would have thought, with you know, when we're looking to get us back again. They're the things I think would be looked at like magnified. You know, let's look at it. Why are people going elsewhere?
Chair, Councillor Mogford, I can't use the hand up signal. Can I ask a question?
If I can bring in Reese first of all, if that's okay, and then I'll bring.
That's absolutely perfect. Yeah.
Thank you. And Reese, yeah, if you want to come in, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And sorry, just I suppose a general point on that. So I think that's all some valid points from Councillor Whited, but just to ask the committee to remember, this is about a partnership approach. This is not Newport City Council's regeneration strategy for the city centre. So, you know, this is about how partners are working together around a range of things within that Newport offer, and for the other interventions that you're going to be looking at today. Okay, so it's not purely about what the council is doing. Obviously, we play a key role, but this
I accept that, Reece, but also because we're in conversations with other partners, that why are we not sharing it? Why are they not saying, look, this is what we did and this is how we've managed to, you know, where I'm coming from? They've got a bit of success, so why are we not having that conversation with the partners? It's not, I know it's just not just about Newport. It's like sometimes I go off on a tangent talking about my ward. I could do that around green spaces tonight. I might bite my lip on that, but there is a big conversation to have amongst the partners, not just about Newport.
And what you got tonight is an update on what partners are doing. Again, not just the council. So I'll just ask the committee to bear that in mind in the questioning.
Yeah, Chair, may I ask, I did say about, are they all working together? I did say that, Chair. We're all working together. Thank you. Thank you, Reece.
That's fine, all. And if I can bring in Ray, please. Councillor Mogford.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I feel a bit chastised now. I was going to talk about some of the wider issues. I'm going to talk a little bit about what Councillor Whitehead picked up on, was if you build it, they will come. And I think in terms of partnerships and working together, part of the issue is, well, they won't come because it's difficult for people in the wider distributed wards. Getting to the town centre is a huge challenge, and getting to the town centre in the evening on public transport is impossible. And I think I might be on a tangent as well, but I think this is all integral to the success of the town centre. It's making it easy for people to go there, to enjoy the nighttime economy. But I'm not going to labour it because I think it's I think we're all aware. So it's not a question, it's an observation. Thank you.
That's fair. I think that can be brought up in sustainable transport as well there, because obviously it's one of those things that link in, but it is obviously part of that Newport offer as well there.
Thank you.
I can't see any other hands up. Reece, did you want to come back in there?
No, Chair, I think...
oh, that's fine. It was a legacy bit on the system. That's fine. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. So on those points there, it's just mainly, you know, the great partnership working. We've seen a lot of working together in terms of things like the Newport Transporter Bridge, the indoor market, various things of challenging yourselves that way. Has there been any challenges that you've kind of dealt with that you can inform the committee and how you've overcome them as part of that partnership?
Shall I come in? I think in generally the board has sort of reflected on where it's done well and where it's seeking to improve, and certainly comms is a challenge, and that's something that we all need to look at. But in general, the partners have have sort of recognised that actually working together has been a success in terms of delivering the Newport offer and other interventions. There are challenges in terms of setting performance measures potentially, but in general, working together well, and I think that's come through in the interventions, but also in sort of tackling COVID as well in that response.
Thank you. That brings on, obviously on the bottom part, it says obviously main risks, barrier to progress as a medium for basically the main summary about the lack of clarity regarding roles and overlap. Do you find that you work smoothly and that there's not a big risk of that overlap happening, or do you find that there has been, and that has been again met with good challenge and dealt with quite swiftly with that partnership?
It hasn't been a particular challenge, but is recognised as a potential challenge, particularly in the city centre, because there are so many different organisations working in the city centre. So the Newport offer has as an action to look at the different groups working there and rationalise where it feels that might be a benefit.
Chair, can I just quickly, going back to Rhys's earlier point, I mean, and I noticed already a few of us have done it. The thing is, when we have these conversations, quite well aware there's PSB and there's joined up partnerships going on. But I think by default sometimes, and maybe it is a bit of an apology, I suppose, but from my viewpoint, we do by default become a little bit parochial, if that makes sense to you. We always look at our own first before looking at the wider picture. Then does that make sense? I don't think it's deliberate, because I do it every single meeting actually, and I'm after the meeting I'm like, I did it again, I spoke about Betis again. It's not a deliberate thing. I just want you to know that it's just the moment. But this is, I think, a challenge for committees such as this in itself is to try and stop looking at it so much with tunnel vision. I can't help that. It's one of my biggest personal annoyances. But and I don't mind being corrected, mind. But sometimes we tend to go off on a tangent. I think somebody else used the word tangent, and like Ray also mentioned the transport there. And again, I would have gone all pro, because I mentioned in Newport, obviously, of course they have Newport Transport and Flexi and stuff. And I know that all this has to be joined up. So he does have a valid point. We can go a little bit about locality, but also that has to also branch out, and that has to be good in linking up with other areas. So in a way, that just kind of flowed into itself. Cheers.
Thank you very much for that, Kevin. Although I do fear walking down Betis probably being spotted out and being called on by you is like what you're doing in my area, but there we are.
Okay, you got it, yeah.
There we are. Now, I know back in October last year, I noted about the kind of bringing in experiences and adventures and new kind of just general experience is probably the best term, looking about the online shopping and what obviously that has the effects on people coming to our town centre or city centre, apologies, slap on the wrist, coming to our city centre and trying to encourage them to take part in other activities. Obviously we've lost things like the cinema, but we've still got the bowling alleys, we've got other things there. Can we, like, has there been anything that's worked upon that? And is there anything that we can look at the successes of putting the bid in for the City of Culture, the music, the art and things like that there, to encourage people and entice them to come in to see what Newport has got to offer in the city centre? It's not just about the shops, that there's a lot more, in Newport about the people as well as the buildings.
Yeah, there is certainly thought about that, but there are initiatives through Newport Now, and there are sort of tourism related initiatives as well, but I can get you some more detail on that if that's helpful. Okay, yeah.
That'd be great, thank you. And I think that's obviously the best thing. If we can entice people in, we got people saying about Cumbrana free parking and stuff like that, but if we can bring in people into Newport and saying, well, we've got these amazing artists, amazing musicians that performing in the streets, that would be a huge success, I think, on a personal level. But yeah, that would be really beneficial. Thank you. Yeah, I see Tom, you popped up as well there. Tom, if you want to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Nicola, it's wonderful that you're all working together, and we appreciate that. Put the public service board, because you knock off each other's ideas, don't you? Say, right, we've done this, that could help you. I do appreciate what you're doing for Newport. and for the rest of Wales, you know, it all adds together, doesn't it? We need people to come to Wales and have a good business base everywhere. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Nicola. So there's 2 points left that I've got there, which obviously the first one is about the recognition. A lot of these points that we're talking about is actual stuff that's tangible. We can physically see it. We see that change. We've seen the bridge. We can start seeing a lot of the work done in the Market Arcade. There's stuff that we can, you know, basically look at and stand outside and appreciate it, which is really good to have that reflection of you know, an acknowledgement of. You know, that's fantastic. And there's stuff like, you know, a lot of people know that in my work in the city centre, to go to the office, I pass new green areas that we've got to pass by the train station, things like that there. I know there's others as well, which is really nice. And I know that's been interlinked, obviously, with green spaces, but does link in with the Newport offer about the look of the area as well, which makes a difference of the perceptions. But building on the perceptions, I'm aware, obviously, the city centre PSBO is up for thing as well. Is there anything that was linked in with that as part of that in terms of the Newport offer? I know it's part of the safer Newport, but is there anything that was linked in at the Newport offer stage? Because I know you mentioned little bits about working with the police, working with, you know, the other partners to make the offer better. But was there anything that you can maybe note about? Was there any changes or anything like that that you have with these partners at this discussion to make the city centre and Newport have a better offer at all?
Well, it's more part of safer Newport work, but it has been reported into the Newport Offer Board as a way of informing partners. Yeah.
Has any changes or amendments been made to that because of what partners have brought? Are we seeing them helping change, you know, to make things better in that way?
It hasn't, not through the Newport offer, not through Newport Offer Board, no, but potentially through other partnership arrangements. Yeah,
that's fine. We can save that for after as well. Yeah, Reese, if you want to come in, I can see your hand up.
Yes, Chair. Just to say, obviously, the PSPO work goes through originally through the partnership structures around Safer Newport, which is a community safety partnership. So a separate but linked in statutory partnership, which is part of Crime and Disorder Act legislation. So absolute linkage in some of the same partners, primarily led by police and local authorities, essentially. So it goes through a partnership arrangement, but not necessarily through this one. Follow obviously cognizant of what's happening in PSB and this intervention.
No, that's perfect, Reece, thank you. And I know sometimes some of the stuff does overlap, and we've already talked about like the greening and climate change, things like that there may get coordinated through the Newport offer because of reasons of interest in that perspective. So fully respect that. I don't have any more questions myself. I don't know if other members have questions about the Newport offer, or is members happy to move on to the next one, which is the strong and resilient communities?
Yes, happy to move on.
Yes, fine.
Yes, Chair, thank you.
Yep, colleagues, thank you very much there, Nicola. Thank you.
Thanks.
There we are. And if I can have the strong resilient communities there, I think, was it Will, did you say you were coming on this one?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Chair. So that was a really interesting discussion, really. And I think, economic regeneration is clearly really important. So, inward investment, jobs, transport infrastructure, nighttime economy. But what I want to talk a little bit about is social regeneration. And I think the pandemic has reminded us where there's been restrictions on social mixing, the things that really matter in life, and it is about our social connections. So this cross-cutting intervention is how we build stronger and more resilient communities. So that's about how we build not financial capital, but actually social capital and community cohesion, and how we improve people's day-to-day lives by developing those supportive social networks. And I, if I may be indulged, Chair, take a little diversion. Councillor Whitehead did just then, so maybe I've got permission. But I remember doing a piece of work with a palliative care physician called Julian Abel, and he was running a program in Frome called Compassionate Communities. And he was really struck, when he was caring for people at the end of their lives, he was saying that the things that really matter in life, it wasn't necessarily the job or the car or even the house. It was three things: love, laughter, and friendship. So this cross-cutting intervention is about social connectedness and how we build stronger and more resilient communities. And the first step in that intervention is around co-production, how we do that together with local communities. And this is a really exciting project, which I think you've probably already been briefed on, possibly by the leader, around participatory budgeting. So the your voice, your choice, your port. So we've been working collaboratively as partners to bring together various funding streams. The project of that now is a pot. I think it's around 415,000 for this year, which will stimulate community-led projects that are around improving people's day-to-day well-being. The focus of this pot of money is about the groups in our community that have been most disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And we were able to sort of understand a bit more about who those people were when we did the COVID impact assessment. So there were a number of groups that were identified, so particularly our BME communities. We know the pandemic's had a significant impact on people with disabilities and their carers, on older people, and not just people who've been shielding, but older people more generally. So there have been some national surveys that show that the levels of mental distress and social anxiety amongst older people has been significant during the pandemic. Young people have really struggled. I think, there's been disruption to education. Children haven't been able to get involved in those activities that they would normally do in their formative years because there's been restrictions on social mixing. LGBTQ communities, our refugee and asylum seeker population in Newport, and some of the communities that were already facing socioeconomic disadvantage, who are maybe now even more over indebted or have lost jobs as a result of the pandemic. So we're really trying to reach out and work with communities to address the impact that the COVID pandemic has had as we move into the recovery phase. The funding is put towards making sure that those groups have good information and good access to the support that's out there, and there is a lot of support out there for people. How we help people get back to community life again, how we build better mental well-being, how we build more resilience and more cohesion in the community. So we're inviting community-led projects around those eligible groups and funding themes. There's a steering group that oversees this project, which includes the people that are likely to be the beneficiaries of the programme. So the Newport Access Group, there's the Ethnic Minorities Youth Support Team, the Newport Fairness Commission, and so on. So that's the first step, and that programme, certainly in the first few rounds, has been incredibly successful, and it's quite heart-wrenching actually to read some of the projects that have been put forward, and clearly those projects are speaking to a local need that wouldn't normally have been addressed through statutory services. And I have to say, Chair, that one of your officers in particular, I'd like to mention Hugh Williams, who's been instrumental in driving this. So yeah, just think that's worth recording. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about, the first step. The second then is around some of our place-based approaches. So we feel that actually if we pull together all the assets in the local communities, bring agencies together, we can have more impact than if we work on our own. So we've got 2 wellbeing collaboratives now that have been set up, one in Pill and one in Ringland. And this allows us to take much more of a collaborative or an integrated approach to improve well-being. So there have been a number of projects set up in Pill around the community allotments. There have been a series of health and well-being events. There's guided walks started for 50 people who are 50 plus. There's the new Pill Connect website. There's ongoing kind of community conversations as well to understand what is really at the root causes of some of the issues, but also what some of the well-being priorities are for people that live in that area. And similarly with the Ringland Wellbeing Collaborative, there's been various events. And if you remember, this is the reporting period around the last half-term period up to September. And there were a programme of events run from the Ringland Neighbourhood Hub. There's the Community Gardens Project. There's the Wellbeing Woodland Activities. And again, sort of ongoing community conversations and engagement about what the issues are and what the community in Ringland would like to do next. The other sort of area-based initiative has been in Betis. So there are 2 sort of complementary preventative programs around the early years. So there's the early years transformation program, which is led by the Health Board, and then there's also the Betis Early Learning Communities program, which is funded and led by Save the Children. The Early Years Pathfinder is about, again, how agencies can better work together, not so that families pick from a list of prescribed services, but actually finding out what really matters to families in Betis and trying to sort of redesign and tailor the services to better meet their needs. The Betis Early Years Learning Communities project is more about some of the non-statutory services that can create a supportive environment around families. So things that will support their resilience, so parenting support, play groups, promoting some of the agencies and services and support that's on offer. Tackling digital exclusion and digital poverty, particularly in relation to connectivity. So some people are able to afford mobile devices but can't get the digital connections. Successful transitions, particularly from Flying Start into primary school. And we know how important play is in the early years. So ensuring that there are plenty of high quality opportunities for play and safe play spaces for learning in that early years phase. And then sort of linked to the well-being collaborative, there's the PIL master plan. So during Q2, a program manager was recruited to initiate the multi-agency and strategic work to look at well-being and quality of life in PIL. So there have been a number of developments around that and a number of work streams now that are being brought together that we hope will have much more impact. So that's the second step, Chair, around sort of place-based working, place-based collaborative working. And then the third area is around volunteering. So the Council and Health Board and Gavo have been working closely together to try and increase and build on the outpouring of support during the pandemic. We saw quite a sharp increase in volunteering, and not just formal volunteering, but just civic activity, during the pandemic. And that ranged from, people collecting prescriptions for neighbours who were shielding to delivering shopping for people who are self-isolating. So there's a huge amount of sort of civic activity that we really want to build on and harness in the recovery phase. So a number of the larger voluntary organisations have supported some of the unconstituted community groups, so offering some mentoring to get those groups off the ground, helping them to set up things like bank accounts, support them with funding applications. We're trying to skill up a network of wellbeing champions and community volunteers that can try and engage with some of the more vulnerable people in the community. Again, trying to sort of harness and channel that sort of social goodwill that has been a product of the pandemic. And then obviously with participatory budgeting, that allows us to increase the capacity for some of those groups to develop and flourish. And it means we can get that money right into grassroots activity. So that's the third step around volunteering, Chair. And there's a bit more detail in the highlight report. The plans for the next quarter. So there's the recruitment of the PIL coordinator, which I mentioned. There's within the intervention plan, there's steps now around using the fairness and quality impact assessment just to make sure we are narrowing the inequalities gap. Looking at the representation of that steering group around participatory budgeting, and then working with the Newport Fairness Commission just to help us evaluate the impact that the PB programme has had. And then we're looking to move the Integrated Wellbeing Networks programme from the PIL and Ringland area into Betis to complement the work that's already going on around early years. So those are the plans for the following quarter after September, Chair, and all that is set out in the report.
Thank you very much, Will. Now, I can't see any colleagues with hands up a second, so if I go first there. So as part of the key achievements and successes there, I note obviously there's Betis, there's Ringland, there's Pilby mentioned. Can you enlighten us, is there any other partnership working that's happened outside of those areas in terms of strong resilient communities that you're aware of and have been actioning on? Yeah, I'm sure there is. I mean, there's partnership action happening. I think we maybe should have mentioned that in the introduction, that the wellbeing plan is never going to capture the totality of the work that's happening. I think what we wanted to do initially in PIL and Ringland is test out the proof of concept, whether bringing on a relatively small scale at community level, bringing those different partners together to see if we could have more impact, and then that would give us a sort of blueprint, if you like, Chair, for extending that into other areas. And the next step for us is just to see whether how much we've achieved in those two areas, and then whether that can be replicated in Betis, and then we can move that
sort of model further forward. I mean, if we feel that it's not having the intended impact, we all need to go back and understand why. But I think rather than sort of spreading ourselves too thinly, we wanted to come up with that sort of proof of concept first, test it, make sure it was having the right impact, and then look to use that as a blueprint to spread it into other areas.
Thank you. Well, Kevin, yeah, if you want to come in, please.
Yeah, just a quick one, really. Good, yeah, early learning on better early years is fantastic work. My colleague Jason's involved with that. Obviously, we know that the hubs, they've been fantastic right throughout the pandemic. They're great anyway. But obviously, normally they are the main drivers. Is there a real, do we get from ordinary members of the public, do they come forward in numbers, substantive numbers, to have an impact, an input on the work that goes on? Or is it just, is it always driven the one way, a bit similar to like what Communities First was intended originally?
Yeah.
Whereby they were the drivers of the ideas. That's how it was supposed to work. Is it a similar mirroring going on there?
I think I did like the way that Communities First was set up originally. Councillor Whitehead with the third split, yeah. With the third public sector, statutory bodies. The third was voluntary sector, and the third were residents, community members. And I thought that was a really good model. I think it did move into more of a community-focused programme where some of the priorities were possibly set by Welsh Government. But I think you need that bottom-up approach. I think that's absolutely critical and probably at the heart of what we're trying to do with the wellbeing plan. And just to answer your point, one of the things we're doing is to try and test out these methods for engaging with the community. So things like participatory budgeting, rather than the council or health board saying, we've got 450 grand, we've already sat in a dark room and decided how it's going to be spent. We're actually saying, you decide, you have the choice. And I think when you put the community at the heart of that decision making and they have their say, and they can see that actually the community can lead on some of this. It doesn't need to be delivered by statutory services. They're more than capable of leading on some of the solutions, some of the projects, and you put the money up front. I think you get people to the table, and I think that's why participatory budgeting. That
was my main point, because I'm genuinely not trying to be controversial, but I totally agree with you. I remember reading the white paper on Communities First at the very beginning, and I liked it. But it drifted away from it, I felt, and in the end, it was Community First leading rather than it turned upside down. I don't know whether I'm being controversial in saying that, but I think it genuinely did. And in the end, the residents were being led rather than what it was intended to be. We tell you, and you put things into place. But so I think then the way you spoke there, Will, and you did speak very eloquently, in fairness to you. I think maybe a lesson's been learned there, whereby you are going to give residents return to what the original Communities First was, where the residents do have that voice. But I think, just to finish my question, are you? Can you say that you are getting a quantitative response from residents? Is it a good response? Is it only a few, or is it always the same few? If that makes sense.
I think you do have the sort of usual suspects, don't you? I think in any community.
Yeah.
But I think, and that's why we're testing out these community conversations. I mean, we're working on a number of different approaches, actually, not necessarily in Newport, but in other areas where we've done a piece of work in some of the areas in Caerphilly around what we call postcards from the future. So every resident has a postcard that they theoretically send in to say this is what they want their future to look like. And then we say, well, actually, if that's what you want the future to be like for your community, what are the steps that you need to get there? And what things rely on public sector bodies, and what things can a community do themselves? And it sounds very simple, but that sort of approach really, empowers people to take action.
I think it does. The last point I'll probably make, and because at the end of the day, it is about the wider community and not polarizing things. But sport, because at the end of the day, plays a major role. And I never, ever forgot what Virginia Wade said when she won Wimbledon in the 70s, when she said, your future champions will be on the council estates of Great Britain, because they're the ones with the natural dog and the natural fight. I was, how old was I? 14 in 1977. I just remember thinking, that woman's probably right. You never see an Etonian in a boxing ring. But you do see a Puerto Rican fighting to feed his family. And I never forgot that. And I'm a rugby coach and a boxing coach, and I never forgot that lesson from Virginia Wade. Fair play to her. And talking of which, I just think, again, I have reached out and had blunt. In the end, they turned out really the conversation with Newport Life. But I think also sometimes we forget the sport in the communities. I actually, in my living room last night, I did, quite embarrassed, I did a 40-second video clip, for example, for the civil service kids for granting. They were applying for granting, and that's what leads me into this. You know, there's 350 kids a week training and playing from there, and I found it a bit strange that here we are again. We're cup in hand and we're scrounging again. Sometimes I think that sport and the impact on the wider community regards antisocial behaviour, things like that, wasting the kids' energy so they sleep at night, so they haven't got enough energy to smash the infrastructure up. I think it's really important, and we mustn't forget the importance of sport and the camaraderie, the discipline, and everything that goes along with it. You know, particularly when we did boxing, it was changing kids' attitudes. They were becoming less aggressive. You know, so I'm also mindful that, you know, we should never forget that while we do the practical things, which, you know, goes without saying, that we don't leave sport by the wayside, and we should be massively encouraging kids to get involved in sport. It's very healthy.
I couldn't agree more, Chair. I coach my little boys' football team, and I played for Newport Civil Service, Councillor Whitehead, back in the day. And, you know, for me, it was really important. You know, teaches you about teamwork, doesn't it, and discipline, but also it's really good diversionary activity. I remember there was a project running in New York called Midnight Basketball, and they were having big issues with antisocial behaviour. And when the police and the State Department tried to deal with that, they were just displacing the problem. It was just moving elsewhere. So what they needed to do, and what they did in the end, is to speak to the young people about what it was, and they were bored. You know, the reason why they were getting involved in antisocial behaviour, they were bored, and they realised that these problems weren't happening at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they're happening at midnight. So, you know, rather than organising activities at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they organised midnight basketball. So the State Department commissioned some basketball courts in the problematic areas. They had the detached youth service working, but it was youth-led. It was led by the young people. They set up their own league, and they were running basketball in the middle of the night, because it was important diversion activity. And the kids that were involved in that, and they had hot dog and burger vans and things. It was a great event, music playing and everything. And rates of antisocial behaviour went down, you know, but it's because they work with the community in that way.
And listen to their voice, yeah, spot on.
So I think we're fellow travellers, Councillor Whitehead, and we're sort of talking the same language, which is really encouraging. And I think that what was at the heart of Communities First back then is what we're trying to sort of recreate now, you know.
Yeah, acknowledged. Yeah, acknowledged.
Thank you both. Councillor Suller.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, William. It's nice for all the agencies to be working together and getting aspects of life into Newport and saying, right, it's the multicultural people. Are they getting involved with this? And I think they are. And I do. I appreciate that. And do you find that, William, that they are coming on board and working together?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I find that, Councillor Suller. I think that, you know, as well as sport, I think the arts, cultural activities are another way to bring communities together, and sharing customs and cultural activities is really interesting for people and can really sort of knit the community together. So I think, as well as sport, I think the arts and cultural activities are really important to if we're going to have more, you know, strong and cohesive communities in the future, and that means that everyone needs to have their voice. Everyone needs to be, you know, treated with, you know, respect, and feel that they're an equal partner in this, you know, and that they've got a stake in their community. So those values have got to be at the heart of it, really, you know. I couldn't agree more.
Tom.
Thank you, Chair. That's okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you both.
Cheers.
Thank you both. So on the point, wanted to bring in, because obviously one of the factors is about isolation and loneliness. Just wanted to ask in relation to working with partners, including the private sector potentially, especially with COVID, people working from home, about in-work isolation. So even though they might be talking to people on the phone in a professional manner, it's not really talking to people. It's not, you know, getting what they need as humans in their sociability. Has anything been done to help that? Have you as partners worked together in relation to that?
I think we've struggled with successive waves of the pandemic to look at how we can open up community centres, you know, and not just in Newport, it's been across the board, but, you know, village halls and get those community hubs opening up safely again to bring people back together. And that, you know, even now with the current surge in Omicron cases, you know, particularly people who maybe would have volunteered at those hubs who themselves have been shielding and are still quite anxious about venturing out and getting back involved in community life. I think going into the spring and summer, you know, I think things will be better. And we are, you know, looking at ways that we can help address some of that social anxiety and build people's confidence to venture back out again and start taking part in activities. And I think the other thing, you know, the digital transformation during the pandemic has brought huge benefits, clearly, but it does mean that, you know, a lot of people now are working from home. And there are those opportunities to have those interactions with people through the workplace. So we need to find other opportunities for them to interact with people in their local community. So they just, you know, so that's more engineered than just incidental, because they're not getting those interactions in the workplace. So, but we have been quite stifled by that because of, you know, restrictions. And I know we're back down at alert level 0, but there's still a lot of Omicron cases out there, and people are still very anxious about venturing out, I think. But certainly in recovery, you know, over the coming months and years, that's absolutely what we need to do.
Thank you, Will, on that one. I know from a perspective, obviously in my employment, it is a contact centre, and it does feel quite lonely, obviously, at home, have various TV shows on in the background on Netflix and whatnot to obviously keep company in the background. But it was quite nice to find that colleagues were actually doing a thing now. I don't know if you know about it, about basically on a Tuesday night, people can come along, have a walk around. All they do is walk around like the river, the leisure centre and things like that there. And that's been, you know, hugely beneficial to a lot of people in the last couple of weeks. Things like that, that's come from grassroots, which really, you know, should be and rightly be encouraged as part of that, and maybe in other groups there. So it's just another way of, within the partners, are you kind of trying to outreach and link with anyone, you know, organisations like this doing it, or individuals doing this, to try and promote this further?
Yeah, and you'll see, Chair, that there's quite a lot of overlap between strong and resilient communities and the stuff we're doing around safe and accessible green spaces. So if we can put notes, so, you know, I remember doing some work up in Fernhill and Glenboy when I worked in Rhondda and Taff, and there were big issues with the community centre there, because it was to an extent parachuted into the community. There hadn't been much community consultation, and it was, you know, vandalised. They had, you know, razor wire around the fence, and shutters would come down every night, and because there wasn't that community. And I think if we can do the same sort of thing with green spaces and woodlands, so people feel a sense of ownership, you know, that those are their woodlands. It's not, you know. So if they're vandalising, they're vandalising their own assets, you know. So I think there's quite a big overlap here with some of the stuff that Steve's going to talk about around how we create those safe and accessible green spaces, and how the communities feel more ownership of those, and that really brings people together. And I think there's another big overlap with what Craig is going to talk around sustainable travel, because if we can get people out of their cars and walking short journeys, you know, those incidental interactions they have with neighbours and people at the school gates, if there's a walking bus, you know, safe route to school, then that's all going to help to build up those relationships, you know, between people that wouldn't ordinarily connect, maybe. So I think, Chair, when we get onto those other cross-cutting interventions, that might hopefully will kind of become apparent, but we can come back to it maybe if it doesn't.
No, I appreciate that. Obviously, I know a lot of the sections do kind of have those natural crossovers, which is expected on those. On this, do you have much linking with partners, especially with young people? Have you listened to young people in relation to any strategies? We heard from Councillor Whitehead about like sports teams and the benefits of those, and I know you mentioned about yourself and football. Is there anything else that you've engaged with them to help you and your partners to link in with this area?
Yeah, I mean, we've got an incredible youth council, haven't we? And I think I mentioned earlier on the steering group, Children and Young People were one of the groups that we're trying to reach. So and we want to make sure that those young people who are likely to be the beneficiaries are involved in that steering group, and the whole program isn't imposed. I'm sure we could do that a lot better. I think it's very difficult to identify people that can represent all young people, because it's such a would be such a diverse community. So we are trying to do it. It's at the heart of the legislation, really, isn't it? It's about the well-being of future generations. We are doing it to an extent. I think we could probably do it better, and make it more representative of all young people in Newport, rather than maybe just a select few. So yeah.
That's great, Will. And when you were speaking in introduction, I kind of made a note there. In Nicola Dance's kind of introduction, she noted about the various partners. Can you just let us know, obviously, in your area, who are the main partners in your area that obviously you link with, and maybe kind of just a brief summary of what they bring to the table, maybe? So
there's Craig works for Citizens Advice Bureau, but also chairs the Newport Third Sector Partnership. So there's a range of voluntary organisations there that are sort of represented, I suppose, by that partnership. We obviously work, really closely with Garvo. We work quite closely with Newport City Homes, particularly around some of their master plan developments, because then the built environment as well is really important for building, strong and resilient communities. So we work, quite closely with Kerry Doyle and her team, and have done over the Ringland Master Plan and the development of the Ringland Hub. And then obviously, your officers within the council, and that's on both sides of the house. So I've, historically had really good links with people like Chris Humphreys, but now, Sally Ann Jenkins on the social services side, on the people side, and then obviously with Bev and the team that work on regeneration, investment and housing on that side of the house as well. So yeah, it's really across all the different sectors, and some of those partners, it's about trying to stimulate the grassroots activity that Councillor Whitehead was alluding to. For some of them, it's about how we can change the built environment so that it helps to create the environment that creates stronger, more resilient communities, or it's about improving the infrastructure, or it's about developing hubs where people can come together. So all of those partners have got a really important role to play in it.
That's great. Thank you very much, Will. And Tom, I think you want to come in, Councillor Silla? Oh, sorry, Councillor, you're on mute.
Sorry, Chair, I do apologise. It's about myself, people of a certain age, William. I'm 77 yearly next week, but do you communicate with them as well? Because a lot of them don't know anything about Facebook or WhatsApp or anything like that, anything technical. How do you get in touch with those people, please?
There is the Senior Citizens Forum in Newport, and they're quite active. I've spoken to them on a number of occasions. I think I talked before about the benefits of the digital transformation over the pandemic, but I think there are definitely some disbenefits. And I think with our network of wellbeing champions, sometimes it's word of mouth to get the information out to those people. I think when we can start opening up the community hubs again, just going in there and seeing what's on the notice board, speaking to the hub manager about some of the activity. I think we can't just rely on technology, and I think there is a certain demographic that won't access some of this support through digital means, and they're potentially then digitally excluded. So we need, so I think our methods have got to be much more sort of nuanced than that, depending on the sort of group of the population we're trying to reach, and not everyone is switched on by social media or wants to spend all night on Facebook and Twitter and things, So yeah.
Okay, thank you, William. Thank you, Chair.
Could I just jump in quickly there, Chair, to back
Is
what
it related, Kevin? Yeah.
Just really quick, what Tom has touched on there. Obviously, over the course of the pandemic, I've been working in the background with the hubs and stuff, and it's been fantastic because it filled a massive lonely gap, and I use that word deliberately because I was made aware how sad, actually, because I'd knock the doors of some of these old and vulnerables, and I'd say, how are you coping? They go, well, it's normality to me, Kevin. You know, and then the penny would drop, and I'd realise some of these poor people, it was normality because they were isolated in the first place. So the pandemic, the loneliness of the pandemic wasn't really massively impacted on it, but it made me think about it. And so Tom has a fair point there. And I just remember thinking, and he just led me into this, about the leafleting of these people. This is something to do, just and a contact number. And that is probably because you're right, Will. Some people are dispensed accidentally. It's not a deliberate thing. They don't do the internet. They don't do this, and not all of them have got children and grandchildren. So yeah, I mean, maybe some sort of leafleting campaign would work, whereby whether they respond or not is entirely up to them. But I mean, it'd be nice for us to be seen to be doing something like that, because yeah, there are people who are living in isolation and loneliness anyway, which I found out, and I've actually made me quite sad. But I made some good friends.
Well, that's good. I think the word of mouth. So I think the word of mouth, the traditional leaflet drop, the community newsletter, the notice board in the community centre, all those methods we need to get back to, you know, post pandemic. And I think, you know, loneliness and isolation amongst older people is a big public health issue, actually, Chair. And you know, we've got a number of, you know, it's not all about befriending services. It's about communities coming together to, you know, recognise the valuable contribution that older people make to the community, and then, you know, older people not just being passive recipients of support, but taking an active role, being the volunteers. You know, another quite sad statistic is that, you know, older people are more likely than working age adults to experience anxiety and depression, but are least likely to come forward and access support because they don't want to bother the GP or, you know, whatever it is. So it is a loneliness and isolation, and the impact that has on older people's mental health is significant, and we are, you know, aware of that, Chair, in the work we do.
Thank you. Before I bring in my colleague Malcolm, can I ask, obviously with those points, how much do you kind of refer to councillors as well? Because obviously as elected members in our communities, we may know certain community members and things like that. It'd be nice to know, you know, about what work you do to kind of tell us about what's out there, what functions, what actions have been undertaken. Can you advise us about how your partners are outreaching to us as well as other activists in the community?
I know members are involved in the, you know, in the participatory budgeting programme, but you know, and we've got the, you know, got the means of engagement around that. We've done quite a lot of asset mapping, looking what the assets are in the local community. It's probably something we could strengthen, actually, Chair, as we go forward. Maybe we need to put in some protected time just to have that two-way conversation with members about what we know, our intelligence, and what members know, and then collectively we'll know more together, you know. So that is something we could certainly look to go forward. I'm not sure how that might be facilitated, maybe through democratic services or something, but yeah.
That'd be brilliant in that way, Will. I think it would be, you know, just another way to strengthen, obviously, our stance in communities, and that obviously we on our roles in the community and who we speak with. You know, sometimes I get people on the phone about issues, but they like just to have that conversation as well, because sometimes that's the only conversation they may have, and that you kind of hear about, you know, a lot about their life, a lot about their experiences through you know, about moving from one area to another, and it's. Some ways it's disheartening because you're just like, oh, you know, I'm the only person that they come to. That's sad that they don't have other people around, because sometimes they don't have family, they don't have the friends in that capacity, or they can't get to their friends and things like that there. But it's just some things that maybe we can know about and things like that there. And as you said, intelligence share between the two kind of groups, and again, further and better the partnerships, you know, as a whole. Definitely. Yeah. Thank you. Malcolm, if you want to come through as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for turning up late to the meeting. Moving on, with regarding England at the minute, I'll just say generically, we're having fantastic results here with the new super surgery and with Newport City Homes and the development and future developments going on. And I listened to Kev, and you're on about the boxing and all the sporting activities for the youth. The youth are using the hub at the moment as well. But what I found is, and I'm finding with regard to the sporting activities, we've got a great field out there, and we can use, which is being used for the football. But what I'm finding is there's lack of changing facilities for sporting teams. In the hub, there's a small shower area. I don't think it's big enough for 2 teams. And once they do play, Where can they go? At the minute, used to have Spencer Boys football with the youth and the older team and the youngsters, which is sort of bypassing because they keep saying they've got nowhere to change. They've got the facilities to play the football, but they've got to get in the car and go home. The same with Hartridge Youth and Hartridge Rugby. They've got loads of money they're ready to spend. Now, with the new developments, have you've all got together and discussed, talking with the community, what you're going to do about these sporting activities that we seem to be losing in my ward, which may be the same in other wards. I can't speak for the other wards.
Yeah, you're right.
I think just on that, Chair, I mean, I was involved in development of the master plan, you know, with Newport City Homes, and it was Kids at the time. And, you know, we spent a lot of time looking at the neighbourhood hub, and I remember the conversation about Sensor Boys and the change of facilities, and, you know, but what we didn't, I think, I'm speaking on behalf of the council here, but I think as a partnership, what we didn't want to do is to say in that hub, you know, that's the flying start bit, you know, that's the Spencer Boys changing rooms bit, and never the twain shall meet. You know, the idea was that you had much more of a flexible space that could be used for different purposes to engage a lot more people in the community. And then there was obviously development of the playing fields and the multiple use games area. And, you know, we're looking forward to the new, you know, health and wellbeing centre. So, you know, we did factor that in, and certainly when that, you know, if and when that goes ahead, we'll be using that space a lot more flexibly as well. And there'll be a, you know, a link between the hub and the health and wellbeing centre. So it was taken into consideration, but I'm not sure if we necessarily got into the sort of detail about where away teams might change and that sort of thing. So, or maybe it's discussion with the hub manager, you know, and unless you probably already had it, I don't know.
Okay, fine, thanks. I was just wondering if they was in a new development, whether you could have any room within that, or we Newport City owns any chance of fitting in some changing areas or something like that for them.
And we might find that the space that's being used by the flank, because it will be more of a, not clinical, but it will be a sort of health and wellbeing area, you know, that it might be less appropriate for that, but we could move some of the services like Flying Start into that space that would release space then in the hub for changing, you know, for the football. So
if you could bear that in mind, because that would help, and also the fees that they're having to pay to use these facilities. To start off, they can't afford it when they're starting off. I know the rugby, they can draw down funds from the rugby union, but to start off when you were Spencer's and start up again, I can help them set it all up, but then they got the ongoing funds. If say right, first year or so, they could have it for free or whatever you, where you can draw down funds. If you can bear that in mind and take that back to the partners, I would say not just for us, but for around the Newport facilities in other areas. Right, thank you very much.
Thank you both. Yeah, I was going to say, not just from England, can we obviously have maybe a look at the whole of Newport, see where obviously that can fit in and things like that with organisations, if that's possible, because obviously we look at the whole of Newport, obviously in these committees there where possible.
And I do think we need to look at the estates generally, you know, how we're using all of our facilities and buildings across the whole, you know, public sector. So I'm sure there's efficiencies to be gained if we looked at that as a whole, you know.
I'm sure as in your partnerships, I'm sure you've, well, I'm going to say heard, but pretty much told to you know, if we can have that back, maybe about what you kind of feed in the next meeting, maybe, just let us know what kind of things have come back. I'm sure members would appreciate that. I don't see other hands up. I think Malcolm's pressed twice on there, so I don't think he's going to come back on that side because that was there already. Can I just double check? Yeah, no worries. Can I just double check with Ray? I know, Ray, you don't have a hands function. Do you have any questions on this section?
No, I've been listening actively, so thanks for that.
No worries at all, colleagues. Okay, thank you very much, Will. Much appreciated. Thank you. Okay, so if we can move on now to right skills, I think, was it Steve Tilly, sorry, on your name on there? I believe it's yourself that's coming on this one, isn't it?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you very much, Chair. And good evening all. Yes, so I'm Stephen Tiley. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Gavo. I'm going to talk about the Q2 Right Skills Intervention Dashboard. So the Right Skills Board is made up of key PSB partners, but it also collaborates with a number of other partners as well. So we have Careers Wales, Department of Work and Pensions, the Training Federation for Wales, just to name a few that sit around the Right Skills Board and support the actual work that's carried on there. It's kind of outlined really is to support the economic well-being, and delivers activities for support of social, environmental and cultural well-being. And it also ensures that it's got that integration as well with all the partnerships well-being objectives. Right Skills itself has 3 main strands of work, and those are the skills to support the long-term economic growth, prevent disadvantage and support equality and opportunity through skills and development, and also the skills development to support social, environmental and cultural well-being. So in line with the dashboard, during quarter 2, we planned virtual Careers Week, which was organised for Newport schools, and they focused on health, social care and the childcare settings. And these are obviously key settings within Newport, but also as well across the regional partnership board. It links in with some of the sort of key pinch areas that we've got at the moment. And you know, to have that option, have that focus has been very positive. It was delivered in quarter 3, but due to COVID-19, we've had to continue this as being an online careers event. And it kind of focused on sort of carried on from the original one as well, in which we had in regards to digital careers. But it was a week-long event. It raised a lot of awareness among pupils on the range of jobs in the sector. There was training and education pathways available as well, and how to secure some of the roles with them. Schools were involved in developing the event, so that was really useful to have that integration there as well, and being able to sort of work the timetables for the schools as well, in order to make sure that we had the maximum collaboration for everyone that was going to be involved in that. We also had a number of employers through Newport as well, so we had the health board, the council social care teams involved, We Care Wales. There was a number of childcare providers and mental health services as well, and it allowed us to for employers to showcase the roles, the jobs, the careers, and it also allowed for students as well to ask on how they can kind of progress through to some of the roles that are available within the sector. The material, I suppose one of the benefits of being able to do a lot of this online is that the material that we sort of gathered from this has been made available now, as there was a number of individuals who maybe not been able to sort of access it. So we've been able to sort of resource that for young people so they can access that in their own time. And then since this as well, I know that colleague Gwent and USW, so the University of South Wales, are reviewing their post-16 curriculum offer as well within Newport, and is now looking at health and social care and as part of their curricula. So obviously that can be a key focus then moving forward to sort of deal with some of the issues and some of the key sort of problems that we might have in our regions. Looking long term as well, it's worth pointing out that we mentioned that we've revisited the Gwent Futures work. Going back a couple of years ago now, I know that this was a real key part of a lot of the PSB workings. Right Skills was part of that. The Gwent Futures work was obviously looking at how we could kind of adapt and look at skills moving forward, how our futures might actually change. That will obviously with the COVID pandemic, that's completely and utterly changed a lot of that. There's been a huge shift in some of the sort of views that we had. So it was important to sort of get them back in, have a fresh take on what's next. And that's been a really important piece of work. And I think it's been really key for us to see some of the outcomes from that, because I know that green skills come out as very strongly in some of that work from Gwent, from the futures work. So looking at employability around climate change, mitigation strategies, green jobs, and how to work more effectively in regards to climate change was something that we need to kind of focus on now moving forward. And obviously dealing with employers and some of the key skills needed for that is going to be part of that reviewing of the data that we got from that actual session, which was really useful. One of the other pieces as well that's kind of tied into this and linked into this is that there's been £800,000 has been secured for the Foot in the Door project from the Community Renewal Fund, which is a significant project. It's going to be delivered by Film Cymru with a view of focusing on the film and TV sector. So it's going to look at increased access to employment, skills development in Newport for the benefit of this South Wales TV and film sector, which there are shortages in the area. There's a number of creative industries as well, which are sort of going to look towards growth employment within that area as well and in the region. So this has been a real key project that allow us to sort of tap into some of those shortage areas for sort of improving on skills. And I know that as part of this as well, as part of that Foot in the Door project, they'll be delivering a number of community-based workshops as well. There'll be masterclass events, live briefings, and also training and employment opportunities as well, which is going to be very much targeted towards community groups and housing association tenants and people who are neat within Newport. Also, as well as part of that project is going to be support for further education students on linked courses. So we often think about the TV and film sector as just being about producing the television programs, etc. But it's going to be very much just about thinking about the carpentry to build the sets, the electrical installation, art, catering, hair and makeup, etc., and all of those pieces that come actually behind that. So there's going to be opportunities as well for training and work experience and placements to try and support that for our further education, our further education students as well. So that'll put them on the right track for future employment. There is going to be a number of beneficiaries that's going to link into this. There's going to be about 300 all in all, and it's going to be broken down into 3 tiers. So there's going to be an access and awareness tier. So there's going to be 230 community beneficiaries delivered across a number of training initiatives. There's a work readiness, so there's going to be in-depth training, which is going to sort of have 50 beneficiaries, and then obviously, and then it's on top of that, there's going to be steps to employment. So there's going to be a number of industry work placements as well that are going to be designed specifically to this. Where there's going to be a number of beneficiaries, both business and community as well. There's going to be an element that's going to be focused on diversity and equality of opportunity. So there's going to be established links between local education providers and then the screen industry for longer term thought process. So we're going to be linking in with a number of organisations, Screen Alliance Wales, Celtic Cymru, Careers Wales, and a number of Newport partners as well is going to get involved in that. And the project is going to run until June this year. So it's going to be quite focused. It's going to be quite driven, but it's going to be a big project with a lot of opportunity within Newport. There's also the youth engagement progress framework, and we've been busy with partners collaborating to prevent young people from becoming NEET. So the project has already shown great successes in reducing the number of NEET young people within Newport. And then early identification of individuals who might actually become NEET young people has been really effective in sort of pushing this forward. And we've been linking in with partners then across schools and Coleg Gwent, focusing on school leavers and collaboration with Careers Wales to try and help support young people who don't necessarily have a planned destination or plan of where they're going to be going once they leave their education. So we're going to have some options for them as well, which has been useful. I'm also going to mention as well from the dashboard about the REACH project and the REACH Restart project. So that's a collaboration between Coleg Gwent and the council, and it's looking at providing English as a second language and employability support to refugees. Funding for that has been extended now up until March 2022. But again, it's another opportunity for funding for refugees then as well to get involved in opportunities for employment. There's also an element of this which is about skills and development for the environmental cultural well-being side of things. So there's been a survey of Newport people and looking at motivations for learning. Some of the key findings that we found was that social well-being is an important aspect of adult education, and residents they wanted to use education as an opportunity to meet new people, make new friends and develop new hobbies and motivators, etc. And education classes can be seen as a part of that. Now, with my Gabo hat on, I think that's extremely interesting. That has come out of that sort of survey, in a sense that really shows is a desire for community learning, and it's maybe not necessarily just working towards the economy, but it's actually to make people feel happier in Newport, make people happier in their communities. So that's a really important consideration, especially, and as we were just listening to Will now, we were saying about some of the impacts of COVID with a lot of the community centres and community venues actually being shut. You know, it's important that there's an element of an area for them to actually go in and have that opportunity for training and look at some of those training opportunities. So that's a piece of work that we might need to focus on as well. And with the support now coming out of COVID, of organisations like myself, Newport Council, and all the other sort of partners around the table, is about trying to put those opportunities on for our communities. We're also developing an online offer for Adult Learners Week, so we're hoping to build up an event for next year, and then we're looking at sort of new motive, and this being one of the motivators for our thoughts then moving forward. We've got digital literary courses which have been in put in place. We just touched upon now about digital exclusion. That's been really one of the key impacts, I think, from this COVID-19. And it was interesting to hear now when we said about how some people were already excluded before. I think that is the case. I think there's been a lot of exclusion in the past, but I think that COVID-19 has actually exacerbated that. And it's actually either made them even further excluded or people who were kind of on that borderline to drop into the excluded box. So I think that the fact that we can work with IMUHB as champions and ourselves and try and look at get connected courses and look at Digital Communities Wales to try and put on opportunities which would be facilitated by University of South Wales and the adult community learning courses. I think that'll be really, really productive as we move forward now into sort of coming out of the pandemic. We're also developing a carbon literacy training for rural areas in Newport, and that's going to be funded from the Rural Development Fund, so that it's there to help people understand the actions about looking at carbon footprint and focusing on mitigating climate change, which again sits in with some of the feedback that we've had from the Gwent Futures updates that we've been having with discussions with them. So that's been useful. And part of that element is going to be, though, is that in order for us to roll that out even further, and we're looking at the trainer element. So the more people we can get involved, then the further and wider and the more sort of opportunities we can get that out to our communities, which would be great. And then finally, there's been a positive collaboration between partners to promote Welsh language as an employment skill. So we've got opportunities now to look at Welsh language and Welsh language training as well, to look at skill shortages within the workforce. Just going to touch on the table as well, just before I finish up. So we've got some of the main risks. We have put it down as a medium status there about lack of buy-in from providers. We're going to look at opportunities now for identifying engagement. Engagement's been so difficult through COVID-19. So we've got all partners on board with looking at how we can engage more with the individuals who are going to be sort of linked into this in our communities, and look at some of the communication options as well, because at the end of the day, we've all got communications arms to our organisation, so it's about sort of maximising those to make sure we can get out to our communities. We've got 2 performance indicators there, which are in a percentage of year 11 leavers that are not in education and employment training, which are the NEETs, which I should have probably said a little bit earlier, and then a percentage of 13-year-old leavers as well. And we've got 1.8 and 2.5% against those respectively. They are Welsh Government targets, just for you to be aware, but we're going to have more information on that and be able to report that back in June, because it gives us the opportunity to look at that full year period. In regards to Reach Restart, we had a target of 48 individuals who was going to look at improving English language skills. We managed to hit that, so we put that as green. We have 52. And then there's also individuals who were provided employability support from April to June. The target was 20, and we've had an actual target of 26, so that's been marked as green also. And then just finally, some of the points that we were going to do for the next quarters, which is happening in Q3, but it's going to continue as well moving forward, is about delivering more of the online careers events for schools in regards to health and social care. So keep that on the boil and make sure that we continue with that work, because it's so important at the moment with some of the pressures that we're having in that sector. Looking at promoting case studies to try and encourage participation. So looking at some of the positive the positive case studies from Newport learners. We're looking at developing the actions from the Futures Workshop. So because we had that Futures Workshop, I think the next key point for us now is to actually look at some of the intervention points that we've had and actually pick up from the feedback that we had from Gwent Futures and our workshop that we carried on. So maybe we might need to look at some of the sort of key outputs that we might sort of be targeting now moving forward because of COVID. So it's important to take that into account. I support the links to the semiconductor clusters and schools. That'll be a big piece of work. And then also as well, finally, it's to look at developing links with the Newport skills related projects and the community renewal funding, because obviously there's going to be a number of organisations within Newport and within Gwent that might actually have community renewal funding as well tied into it. So how does that fit in with what we're doing in Newport? How does that fit into what we are doing in regards to the Film Cymru project? So it's about trying to tie it all in and see if we can all work together for the benefit of the community that we're covering for. So there's going to be a bit of work around that as well. So open for any questions. If anyone would like me to elaborate on anything, I'm more than happy to do so. But thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. A lot of information there, definitely, and a good positive work being shown. Kevin, I think you wanted to come in first there, please.
Well spoken, Stephen. Just a few points off me, really. And I think what you first said, Steve, is probably the most challenging. This has been with the pandemic. I think they say the skills and linking. And it is massively ambitious, as you more or less alluded to there, Steve. For me, it was about online engagement. This is, again, it's another challenge, focusing people, keeping people focused. You start off well, you know what it's like. You start off well and then it can sometimes peter off. The TV media thing, you usurped me. I was going to mention that. I just think that today it just seems to be very popular. We see them around where I am, that the kids are picking up the microphone and whatnot, and cameras. That's good. It is good. So you did cover that. I was going to say you're going to be looking at that, and then as I was thinking it, you said it. So I'm happy to see that, and that would be very popular. But I do feel there's a lot of content that you came out with, and I think it is ambitious, and you've got to admire ambition. But I will say I do see your area as a big challenge, and it always will be. One of the main things for me as well, are you in a position to say, like the NEETs, for example? They've always bothered me, NEETs. Would you say that the numbers spiked because of the pandemic, or are the numbers flattened out? Is there a normal amount of numbers of NEETs to be expected? Can you qualify that or quantify that at all, Steve?
I think what we need to do is we need to look at the numbers of those now, because obviously the pandemic is going to skew some of those numbers. Welsh Government have given us a percentage that would go into that. But I think that we need to, like I say, we'll have more information on that in June. I wouldn't like to say, to be honest with you. I think it's a bit of a it's a difficult one really to sort of quantify whether there's a right amount or not. I think that what we are trying to do is to try and actually pick that up earlier on later. There could be a case that going back over a number of years, we may not have sort of given that kind of guidance to to young people who might have ended up going into that and, not in education or employment. But I think that by actually addressing it and looking at it as we are as a board and trying to make sure that there are pathways and support for people who we think might actually be going down that route, I think that it might actually help that situation moving forward. I have no doubt of that. But yes, I mean, it would be interesting to see how COVID has kind of impacted on some of that, I think, and then trying to work out some of the kind of the data behind it then on why that has happened. Because, like I say, we are trying to put in some mitigating opportunities to try and curb it, but it's whether it happens any further.
I think for me, and this is like over the years, because obviously I've known a lot of the kids that come through the NEETs, and I just remember thinking, used to have Gough Davis. I don't know whether you know Gough. Remember Gough Davis? He was a Pontypool rugby player, ex-headmaster, and he ended up working with the NEETs, and he was brilliant. And I remember him saying to me, Kev, I've played against the All Blacks. The NEETs is a massive challenge. And I never forgot that. This 6'3" man was saying it's a challenge enough. And I do believe he had a lot of success in it. But it's something that I've often, because I know a lot of kids that have come through the system, trying to evaluate the success rate of it is also difficult, isn't it? Because you kind of lose track of them, because it seems to be like a revolving door. The NEETs always was. But for me, in the skills area, it's always one of your biggest challenges. And I thought it appropriate to say, do the numbers, do they ever get better year on year, or do they just seem to stay the same?
I haven't got the numbers to compare year for year. I see that Reece is coming. I don't know if Reece has got a comment on it. I haven't got the numbers to look at year from year, but like I say, we'll have more. We can definitely bring something back after we've got that report in. I want to go more of the data in June, if that helps, and we can maybe have a conversation about it then, or we can send something across. I'm more than happy to do that.
Cheers, Steve.
Yeah, Reece, if you want to come in, please.
Yeah, Chair, just very, very briefly, so just to put that in some context, Councillor Whitehead, I think, when I was responsible for this area of work 12 years ago, we had 10% of year 11 leavers becoming not becoming NEET, not in education, employment and training. So that's been brought right down. It'll be, as Stephen said, it'd be really interesting to see the impact of the pandemic on that. It's too early to know what that is at the moment because of where we are in the year. But partners, you know, all partners involved in this: schools, the local authority, voluntary sector, Careers Wales, training providers, etc. have done an incredible job in ensuring that young people leaving education given every opportunity to progress into an appropriate opportunity for them. So it's you know, it's come down hugely, but it is still a massive impact, because every young person who's not in education, employment and training is a lost opportunity as well. So we've got to be really mindful of that as well.
Cheers, Rhys. I thought it was a good question to ask, actually.
Thank you both for that. If I can bring in Councillor Suller.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Stephen.
Hello.
Stephen, you know, do you know the grants? Is it a long? I hope it's a long-term thing. Is it?
The grants, they are the Community Renewal Fund is the money that's coming from UK government. So there was money that was going to be put in from them in order to sort of invest into areas. So we had to bid into that. Unfortunately, it's only up until the end of June, so it is quite focused. But what we are hoping is we're going to have to continue to monitor that as we move forward, because it's going to give people opportunities to get involved in these certain sectors, whether it be carpentry, whatever it might be, might give them work placement. So we're hoping that we can carry that sort of legacy on from it further, so it gives them idea, you know, people who are getting involved in it, young people, sort of options in where they want to go with it. But the actual money itself has got to be spent by the end of June, so there is quite a tight time scale on it. But there has been a lot of work in regards to actually putting in the bids. There's been a lot of work that's actually, you know, very focused on how that money is going to be spent. So all of the work that's going into the training programs and the opportunities moving forward are they're all in place. So it's not like as if it's something that's going to, you know, the ball is rolling, so to speak, with it, but it is short and sharp. But that, unfortunately, is one of the problems that we have in at the moment, not just from Right Skills, but, you know, in general, there's a lot of grants that are coming out that need to be spent quite quickly, whether they be UK and Welsh Government. It is causing some issues for us. But I think as organisations, as partnerships, being able to work together, I think what it is doing is it's allowing us to sort of utilise each other's skills, and actually we can put a lot of these bids in and actually get them going and get some really good positive outcomes from them quite quickly, because we're using all our skills effectively. So you know, the legacy will continue. We really see it being some really good benefits for the people, but actually the money, it's got to be spent by the end of June.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. You know, years ago, Stephen, we used to have apprentices, didn't we? Apprenticeships. Now, are firms willing to take on people that don't serve a 5-year term of apprenticeships? It seems to be shorter and shorter, doesn't it?
Yeah, apprenticeships. Yeah, apprenticeships. One of those sort of one of those areas that keep on coming up. There are opportunities for apprenticeships within Newport, but I think that you are right. I think that they are getting fewer and far between, unfortunately. But it is something that, you know, there's a lot of organisations that are putting those opportunities out there for us to work with. But it's obviously us, you know, as sort of public sector partners, and to try and support that and try and promote those as well. So yeah, so obviously working with the University of South Wales and Coleg Gwent in particular, you know, they are kind of tied into those, because they're obviously linking into the individuals who were sort of within that education area.
Okay, one more question, please, if I may, Chair. Do you go to schools, Stephen, and explain what you're doing for school children, and are they keen on it?
There is school involvement. I think we could probably work more with the actual schools themselves and the young people in the schools, but we do have representatives from the schools who can get that message out. It's the same really with, you know, we've got a really good representation from, like I say, University of South Wales and Coleg Gwent, as well as those schools. So the communication is getting where it needs to go. They're probably, and like I say, we are putting on, you know, the training opportunities and making them available. It is difficult because it depends on what ages in which schools can get involved in some of that, obviously, because it's got to be targeted to certain ages because of the employment link into it, and the sort of, you know, the way that we see giving opportunities for young people. So it's got to be targeted at certain ages, but we can get involved now. But it's probably something we could probably look at more as we move forward with it now, and looking at some of those age ranges that we do link into. Yeah, but you know, it's something that we can definitely do.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you both. Just to maybe of interest to Councillor Suller, I know the council of advertising on YouTube about apprentices and apprenticeships going out. On that basis, is there any other kind of like linking in with other partners? Are partners looking at apprenticeships and working together to maybe hold apprenticeships as we move forward with these new partnerships on board?
Apprenticeships is something that we've touched upon. I wouldn't say that it's something that is one of the key points that we've sort of looked at in particular. It's definitely something that's there on our radar, but I would say that it's probably something we probably need to revisit. But obviously all partners will have apprenticeships if they can actually bring those on. I know that there's a number of public service board partners that we've been discussing for a long time now. We've been trying to advertise a lot of the apprenticeship opportunities to the local authorities, health board, etc. There are opportunities there, and obviously they are linked into right skills. But those apprenticeship opportunities, there is probably a need to sort of tie that back into some of the work that we are doing, and maybe look at some of the advertising. But maybe that might be something that we can kind of delve into a little bit more as we progress forward with it. So it's not necessarily linked at the moment.
No, perfect, thank you. Slightly off, I know of the report there, but we talked about this COVID recovery and things like that there, and just wondered with the kind of empowerment of seeing volunteers and activists within communities that have never stepped up before, is there a way that we can maybe provide qualifications to them about management, about organisation or things like that, to recognise the hard work on that basis, and to allow them, if they don't have skills, to basically be accredited for a lot of the work that they may have done through that and through other means?
Well, volunteering, I mean, from a Gavel point of view, volunteering is, it's one of our key aims, really. We've got our volunteering centre within the organisation. I know that there's been huge support by all partners, really, to try and help support volunteers, especially in regards to COVID and a lot of the fantastic work that's been going on by volunteers to try and really step up and try and help and support. I think that from a point of volunteers will go out and they will commit themselves into opportunities that might be linked into organisations to support the community. In regards to kind of qualifications and training, it's always been a little bit of a sort of grey area, I think, in the sense that volunteering, I see it as a real stepping stone into employment. It gives you an opportunity to sort of put something on your CV that you're willing to give time to your community. It builds on your ability to work with people and teams and things like that. Whereas actual qualifications is a little bit of a grey area, because like a lot of the MBQ qualifications, for example, they may need actual work experience, and it can't always cover volunteering links into that. So there isn't any specific, as I'm aware, that you can do that, but you can definitely. So I definitely see it as a real step into employment, and it really gives an opportunity for people to understand. And we were talking just a little bit there about people who are not in education and employment and training. I think volunteering is definitely something that gives you that broader sense of what is going on in your communities, and it can get you involved with certain aspects of our communities and the work that is carried on in the community. So I think it can definitely help and support in that sense. But for us, I mean, the ideal is, for volunteers to be definitely recognised through various different volunteering award schemes and things like that for the epic work that they did during COVID, and they continue to do. But qualifications as such is a bit of a grey area, to be honest. It's definitely a platform into it, but actually a qualification for volunteering is a bit of a grey area.
No, that's fine, Steve. It's more the fact that obviously during the recognition, we know that obviously a lot of people, they don't either have the qualifications or they don't have the experience. And volunteering is a really key point in employment, kind of employability skills, and that experience, whatever it might be. And a lot of things that, we can only hope that people would do for us, in our time of need, that these people done it unspokenly and basically gone out and done it. And is there any way that we can maybe help them back if they are at their end, or trying to find employability or means of employability? I think that's something that we should only open arms to do so, and hopefully with partners work towards that.
And definitely, like I say, I think that any volunteer who goes out there and gives their own time, and they learn those skills, and they they may not have ever worked in as part of a team before. They may not ever have been sort of, you know, had a real key focus, getting up in the morning and having that structure to be able to do that. You know, it only goes towards that experience side of things. You just said, now it might not be a qualification, but definitely gives experience. And I like to think as well is that with volunteering, is that, you know, you might want to get involved in a specific area that you have interest in. That will only take you then and give you that experience in that specific area, but also as well, qualifications and opportunities then will only come your way from that as well. So, you know, there's some real sort of benefits to everyone who's kind of volunteered from what I see. I think I think the country would have been in a much worse state if it wasn't for all the volunteers during COVID, to be perfectly honest. So I think they've done an epic and fantastic sort of service to our communities. It's been unreal.
Well, if we had to pay them, Steve, I don't think the country would ever be able to afford it, would they? So, you know, huge appreciation. And, you know, I volunteer openly with St. John and a few other sources, and you know, the amount of appreciation from the community is very worthwhile. And it's not the reason why I do it. I've done it because I felt I had to. It's part of what I do. But the acknowledgement of others coming off the street, if you will, and getting involved is really empowering for current volunteers to be part of that as well, to see that coming in. So definitely, and thank you for that acknowledgement there. I can't see any other hands up there. I will go to Ray as well. Ray, do you have any questions on this grid?
No, again, I've been listening intently and taking notes, and thanks, Stephen. Very good presentation.
Thank you.
Or discussion, rather.
Thank you. If colleagues are satisfied, if we can move on to green and safe spaces then.
Yes, okay, for me.
Okay, and it's either, I think, is it Steve Morgan or Hugh Drake? It's yep, Steve, there we are.
Good evening, Chair. Can I just check that you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can, yeah.
And see me okay. I've been having terrible problems with technology this evening with Teams. I can't see much that's going on. As long as you can see me and hear from me, then that's absolutely fine. I'm also I've got my colleague with me, Harriet, who may well join in during the update with some of the detail on some of the projects as well. And if anything happens with the technology and I drop out, then I'm sure Harriet could fill in for me. So yeah, I'm Steve Morgan. I head up the Green and Safe Spaces intervention, along with Hugh Jakeway, and Hugh would have given you an update at the last scrutiny session. I did the one before. And as I said, we have Harriet with me tonight. Harriet's a dedicated lead engagement officer for the intervention, and we're really lucky to have Harriet, to have a real dedicated, focused sort of resource person, Harriet, supporting the Green and Safe Spaces intervention. That's particularly helped during the Q2 period, where there were quite a large impact from COVID in terms of what we could deliver, because a lot of the work that we do requires sort of collaborative work in face-to-face. So we actually did quite a bit of work in Q2 focusing on how we deliver what we do, and I'll try and cover some of that in the update as well. I think my summary of Q2 progress has been overall, it's been really good despite COVID and other distractions. It's been our delivery, our progress on delivery has been really good. I wanted to draw your attention to a few what I think are highlights in Q2. The first two actually relate to feedback we had from previous scrutiny session, the one before last. And there were two areas that you asked us as intervention to focus on and to see if we can improve. The first was performance measures and how we measure our performance, and the second was around diversity. And I'll come back to that one. But just looking at performance measures, you'll see from the Q2 dashboard, we've done quite a bit of work from if you compare these to previous dashboards, and actually we are still doing further work on our performance measures. We're really trying hard to make sure that they are measures that are suitable to give us a good indication of whether we're delivering against the wellbeing objectives, and I hope that actually these measures will outlive the wellbeing plan. You know, we can use these as a partnership as the partnership working continues in Newport. You know, we could consider bringing these into the Gwent wellbeing plan as well. But actually, I think these are going to be really relevant and will stay with us for some time. So I think it's important that we've spent quite a bit of time focusing on performance measures. You'll see from the list of measures there that we've tried to introduce real measures of, you know, the amount of green space that we have, accessible green space, you know, the canopy cover that we have. Trying to get that information real time is quite challenging, so we're actually still working on the best ways of doing that. We've got other measures that are kind of, I guess, proxy measures, so pollinator sites, network members, and I'll come back to that in a while. And I think what we've tried to focus on our engagement and communication. So we've been improving our measures on you know, how many hits we have on social media, how many people are engaging and reading the newsletters, tweet impressions, etc. Then we have the ones that you'll recognise around green flags, and again, to thinking about the 5 ways of working, particularly around long term and preventative of action. We're trying to measure how well we influence other plans, so other partner plans and other partnership plans as well. Again, we're still developing that now, but you'll see that there are 3 plans there that we feel that we've got the green infrastructure strategy firmly embedded in, and the last of those performance measures really relate to the safe aspects of the green and safe spaces. So looking at the antisocial behaviour, fly tipping, deliberate fires, etc. So I just wanted to focus on that because we're still finalising these, but I think they'll outlive the wellbeing plan. So I don't think it's there's any harm in us continuing with that work now, even though we're at a relatively late stage in terms of delivering the wellbeing plan. And that was based on feedback we had from Scrutiny a couple of sessions ago. The other one was on diversity and inclusion, and you challenged us on how inclusive we were, how diverse communities we were serving as a green and safe spaces intervention. And there's a couple of examples in Q2. One was around the rapid review of the research that there is out there on diverse communities and access to and usage of green spaces. And that work has been undertaken. We have now some recommendations that we can take forward. And we've also tried to broaden our network to be more inclusive. An example of that will be when we're working with a partner organisation, The Gap in Newport, who are working with refugees and asylum seekers. And there are other examples of how we've grown that network to be more inclusive and represent more diverse community we have in Newport. So I just want to highlight those because they came directly from previous Scrutiny session and some feedback we had from you. So other highlights that I wanted to draw attention to. Firstly, the network. I think it's important just to reflect on how well our network is growing. So the amount of people, community representatives, partner organisations that are involved in the green and safe spaces is growing quarter by quarter. It was reported in Q2 at 135, I think, but we're more than that now, and we can feedback further on that at future Scrutiny sessions. It's growing, and there's a real interest, a real sense of community in that network. And another point, it came up earlier on in feedback from one of the other interventions around how we're seeking views from members. And one of the things that's really helped this intervention is we've been joined by Councillor Jason Hughes. Obviously, he's Cabinet Member for Sustainable Development. And Councillor Hughes is not only an ally of the network, he sits on the network, he sits on our Green and Safe Space Intervention Board now, but he's a critical friend where we need a critical friend, and he's been really helping us shape our sort of focus and our strategic approach to make sure that we remain and aligned to the wellbeing objectives and the sustainable development principles that we set out to achieve at the beginning of the development of the wellbeing plan. So that has been a real helpful to us to have Councillor Hughes on board with us. We continue to deliver on many of the projects in Q2. Some of those are listed there in the key achievements, and I'm sure if you want more detail on any of those, that Harriet will be able to support me tonight in giving you a bit more information on those. And we're trying to improve our communication. So we have an excellent e-newsletter. The fifth e-newsletter has gone out now. We were developing it in Q2, and within that newsletter, a lot of the detail of a lot of the projects is covered. So I'm sure that you will read that newsletter, but if you don't, I think I'd point to it as something that is a really important update in itself, in a bit more detail on a lot of the projects that we and the wider community deliver in Newport. I wanted to mention as well funding. A lot of the projects depend on us securing grants and other funding for us to be able to deliver, and our partners to be able to deliver. I mean, the good news, I don't have the figure for Q2, but I can tell you that as of now, we've attracted over £500,000 worth of funding from various sources to help us deliver these projects. Just to break that down briefly, there's more than £200,000 that's come from National Lottery and Nature Networks Fund. About 175,000 that's come from the UK Community Renewal Fund. So the main D Unlimited work that you'll be familiar with has been supported by that UK Community Renewal Fund. We've had £50,000 from the Landfill Disposal Tax Community Fund, and that's helped with one of the projects that you'll see in the Q2 update there, the Bug Life Pollinator project. At the time in Q2, we were developing that and providing support for the bid. It was successful, and we can talk more about that at a future scrutiny session, because it meant the delivery has been after Q2. And another one, which is a really important one, was a £20,000 award from Welsh Government's Transforming Towns Fund. And this was to support some work we've done, which I'll come back to on the city centre, or green in the city centre. So I just want to highlight, I mean, over £500,000 worth of grants and support, financial support that we've had in to deliver these projects from various different sources. We're very reliant on that funding. There are challenges with it, and you've heard from Steve around some of the short-term nature and some of the challenges in actually bidding for some of those funds. But it's been really helpful in delivering this intervention. The other focus for us for Q2 was to really try and develop a better evidence base to help inform and focus the delivery of the intervention. So we developed a new GIS layer, and there's been some fantastic work from colleagues actually in Newport, Newport Council, where we have mapped out all of the green infrastructure. We've mapped out the green spaces. We have that in good detail across the whole of Newport, and on top of that, we're layering other information, so information about antisocial behaviour around fly tipping, about fires, deliberate fire incidents, and lots of other information. And that seeing it visually like that on a GIS layer is something we didn't have before, but it's really helping us target where we look for new projects, where we can deliver to best improve what we can't have currently in Newport, and to focus on areas where we don't have some of those opportunities. I mentioned the £20,000 that we had from the Transforming Towns Fund that we used to better understand what our green infrastructure opportunities are in Newport. So a feasibility study was undertaken in Q2. We were searching for and developing the scope of that feasibility study. We now have the output, and we have a menu of opportunities, if you like, that we can focus on in Newport. And there's another mention in the Q2 report about a smaller project, but about some green roof opportunities that we've got in Newport as well. So we've used that opportunity where delivery on the ground has been more challenging, to try and help develop that evidence base, to develop the information, and to ensure that we're focused on delivering what we set out to achieve in the wellbeing plan at the beginning. The last thing probably to update on is the Green Flag Award, which I think went public after Q2, but I think we knew about it towards the end of Q2, and that was the laundry at Tredegar House. That was a new award, and that complemented the 5 other Green Flag awards that have been retained as well. So that's really positive. You'll know, I'm sure, the Green Flag Awards are only awarded to parks or green spaces with the highest possible environmental standards, and where those standards are maintained, and also where there's good access and visitor facilities as well. So that was really positive. So I think I'll stop there. The risk, there is on the bottom lower left of the dashboard, there is the risk register there, and there is a bit of amber and red in Q2. I think we're in a better place now. Again, in a future update, we'll be able to show that. There are, I guess, still some challenges for us. We're getting towards the end of financial year, the start of a new financial year, and you've heard from a number of the interventions around some of those challenges around annual funding settlements that we have, particularly public sector partners. Some of those funding settlements are what our third sector partners are quite reliant on or can be reliant on. So it is a challenging time. There is a big COVID bill. There are some challenges for partner organisations in terms of the likely funding settlements that we have, and we're working closely with Welsh Government on that, and our partners I know are doing that as well. So that risk remains until there's more certainty around funding and resourcing to continue this work next year. But other than that, the other risks, I think we're mitigating well, and you'll see a greener version, if you like, of our risk register at the next scrutiny session. So I think, Chair, if that's okay, I'll stop there. But it may want to just invite Harriet to see if there's anything you wanted to say, Harriet, on any specific projects that I haven't covered in any detail. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. I think you've covered it pretty well there. I think it's the dashboard does show all the projects that we've got, and as you said, the newsletter as well. But yeah, any questions, happy to respond to.
Thanks, Harriet. Thank you, Chair.
That's great, both. I do see Councillor Suller first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Stephen. I suppose you know about the road to nowhere, don't you?
I do.
It's going to be turned into the road to nature.
A fantastic outcome.
I think that's a hope for the future for the whole of Newport green spaces. But I know the Welsh Assembly built a lake around there for LG. So is there any chance of us liaising with the Welsh Assembly government and getting that turned into a part of the nature reserve?
So I think that's an excellent idea. I'm not aware that we have done that engagement yet, but I certainly take that on board, and I think it's something that we should do. I think that move, and I know how involved you and others have been in this, changing the road to nowhere, and the eyesore that was, and the cost to various partners in terms of sorting that issue out with all of the fly tip in there. I think it's the outcome we have now is fantastic. It's long overdue, and I'm sure we'd agree, but we're in a really good place with that now, and we mustn't lose the momentum there. So I'll take on board that suggestion and see what we can do to further the ambition around the new road to nature. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's one more thing, if you don't mind, please, Stephen, about new trees being planted. I live in Dyffryn, and there's little woods by there by Moorcroig Avenue. They take it's the ash trees that they're removing, aren't they?
Yeah, so unfortunately in Wales there are quite a few tree diseases at the moment. You'll know about larch disease, where we're having to fell lots of larches being felled. Ash dieback was the next one, and there's some real health and safety issues around ash. So ash is being felled at a pace. There is a new disease which is Phytophthora pluvialis, which is affecting Western hemlock and Douglas fir. Again, a new disease, a new tree health issue for us in Wales. So the rate of felling is high, and that in itself gives rise to various sort of issues. But there are lots of initiatives out there for tree planting. Welsh Government have a national forest objective, and they're actually working with a number of partners at the moment to see what we can do on the Welsh Government estate and off the Welsh Government estate, how we can support tree planting. And there are partner offers as well to other public and private sector partners in the network, in the Green and Safe Spaces network, to look at and the offer is to how we can better utilise some of the land in their ownership. So land that maybe it's brownfield, maybe it's barren sort of land, and how we can make best use of that land. And one of those opportunities is around tree planting. So there are a number of initiatives, a lot of initiatives that are going on at the moment to replant trees, and these will be more native, sort of trees for the future. But we are in this sort of transition period, and of course trees take quite a long time to grow back. So we will be seeing the evidence of those plant health issues that we've got in Wales for some time until we have the new plantation growing. But actually, in terms of long-term thinking, the replanting and the type of trees that are being replanted are far better than trees that the species that have been planted in the past. So I think we'll see an improvement in the long term for the future here.
Yeah, and how are we going to, sorry, Chair, how are we going to police that, Stephen? Because there's a lot of people who were vandals, and there were some trees planted somewhere, and they broke them all, didn't they? So are we going to police it? Because we need, like you said, we need the trees there, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge. I think we probably need to discuss that more as a partnership, and I think it's something we can definitely take back to the Green and Safe Spaces intervention. There's a lot of different type of vandalism. I mean, there's massive vandalism when you have these fires that are lit, deliberate fires, which can have a devastating effect on our plantations particularly. And then there's a more sort of local, antisocial behaviour kind of vandalism issues as well. So I think we have better intel now on where these happen and how they're happening. I think in terms of preventing that happening in the future, it's something we have to increase our focus on because of the amount of tree planting that we're going to see over the next decade or so.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you both. If I can call Kevin Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. Tom actually beat me to it as regarding the road to nowhere. I think it's fabulous what's gone on there, and lest we forget that as much as the public criticised it for being allowed to develop into such an eyesore, I think it'll be nice now for the public to see what it's become and what it's going to become. So I can only give you props for that. Some tremendous work around there. Just a couple of points from me. I think we've done this in the past. A bit. I'd like to see a lot more of it. And when we talk about collaboration and mimicking others, for example, I'm noticing, like, I work in England across the bridge, and I do see this a lot, where there's like roundabouts and certain little green space areas that just is a green space. I see the local authority over there, which looks absolutely fantastic. They've just absolutely scattered wildflowers on there, and you can see the motorists slowing down to actually look at it because it's that pretty. And I just think any little niche like that, any little area like that, I mean, obviously I know there's going to be cost and whatnot, but I mean, what that does, not just on the eye, but for the general feel-good factor, it looks fantastic, the spread of them wildflowers. I think we'll all agree to that. Beautiful multitude of colours. So that's my one question, is just to say, is there any consideration going around that? And just before I let you have the floor, so to speak, Steve, the other thing was, and we'll all be aware of this because it's a massive issue for probably every local authority, sadly, at the moment, and that is as you just mentioned, the antisocial behaviour off-road bikers and quads and whatnot. And I just think sometimes they're green spaces that they're tearing up, basically. Is there an opportunity to engage with that section of society whereby any owned area away from that doesn't impact on anybody else in a negative way? Is there a way possibly to mitigate the antisocial side of it by freeing up areas of land where it could be controlled? I just think it would answer an ongoing conundrum that doesn't seem to be no answer to at the moment. Cheers, Steve.
No, thank you. I mean, two really good questions. So to take them both, the first question, I mean, yeah, absolutely. In terms of the wildflowers and things, the one thing that we always need to bear in mind in that what species you plant and where, there are examples that we see where we've got the wrong species planted. They're not native. They're not. You can have colourful native species planted, and that's really important that we don't introduce new invasives and things like that. There are plenty of examples now in Newport. I mean, if you read the November e-newsletter, you'll read about some of the specific examples that we have in Newport. I haven't focused on them today because actually we will focus on those at the next update at the scrutiny session, because they were, a lot of that was delivered in Q3. And I mean, Harriet might have some examples that were delivered in Q2 that we could focus on now. But we are, as I said, there are good examples where we've done that. We are, you know, along the riverfront, you'll see some of that work that's been done by the intervention, by partners in the intervention. You'll see some sort of parklets, you know, examples of parklets that we've created, or partners and community groups have created, and urban planting and things like that. So really important that we do more and more of that. And it is good to see, and it's contagious, isn't it? When you see it, and you see that, you want to see it again, and you generally build support for replicating those good ideas elsewhere. On the off-road kind of vehicles, I don't want to stray off tangent here, because, you know, I'm representing the partnership here, and it isn't something that specifically we have been discussing in the Green and Safe Spaces network, but it is antisocial behaviour, and perhaps we do need to think about it. We are partnering up sort of outside of the intervention as partners, as we always would. We work well with the police, you know, Natural Resources Wales do quite a bit of work on this. You know, they manage on behalf of the Welsh Government estate, where this is a really big issue. I know, I work for NRW. And so there are initiatives. It is a difficult issue. The idea of providing a space where this can happen, you know, and formally allowing it to happen. What we tend to find, and we've done this in the past, and it's been piloted across Wales, is that generally people who like to go off-roading don't want to be contained into a track or a small area. They want to go off exploring and develop their own sort of tracks. You know, it happens with mountain bikes, it happens with you know, these quads, and it happens with off-road motorbiking as well. So it's not always successful. We're working hard, and we are working in partnership, and we will now think about this more in terms of the antisocial behaviour considered by Green and Safe Spaces, to try and combat that issue, but to try and provide the opportunity as well for those that enjoy that pastime. And it can be done in a way that's not antisocial and it's not damaging to the environment.
Yeah, cheers, Steve. It's just a little bit similar as well, ironically, to what Will was talking about earlier on with the basketball case, whereby they were causing issues, and then they kind of mitigated it by having a 12 o'clock session at night and whatnot, and it did have a positive impact. I get what you're saying as regards some of these guys, they won't want to just ride around in circles, for example. So I think if anything like that was to happen, there would be a case of making it interesting then, if you like, so it wouldn't be just, there's the square patch of land, you know, ride to the corners, and you know, there's going to be jumps in there, there's going to be all sorts in there. So I think, you know, it's easy for me to throw it into the ring to speak about it, but I just think it's something with the conversations, I would say, and I don't speak for other people, but I probably am, that we do have on a weekly basis. I expect Stephen does up in the gear around the antisocial use of these powerful motorbikes, you know, so it's always a conversation. So I just thought it was, you know, it might be just worth throwing into the ring, maybe, to have a chat about it. Thanks, Steve.
No, thank you, and I agree. As I say, if I took my partnership hat off and put my NRW hat on, you know, it's something that we talk about every day on the Welsh Government estate. But I think you're absolutely right in that we need to bring it in and consider it more as a partnership. So I'll definitely look to do that, and I appreciate your input on that. Thank you.
Chair, Councillor Mogford here.
Yep, go ahead, please.
I have a question and an observation, I suppose. It's interesting to hear about the cutting down of trees. I live near Wentwood Forest, and trees are being cut down on an industrial scale. That's the one side of the picture. The other side is that trees are being planted on an industrial scale. So the future generations, maybe, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 years and beyond, will see a whole new different type of forest up there than it is at the moment. So in a way that, you know, it's a good net outcome, because we have to cope with the diseases, as you say. My question is about, and it builds on from the wildflowers, and it's about the concept of rewilding, which I've been reading about over the last few years, and the idea is to let land go back to nature. Now, the ward where I live, we have two camps. We've got the people that like to see the verges, you know, pristine, and others like to see, you know, the grass grow, the indigenous flowers, and even unfortunately the imported wildflowers, they like to see them grow. What's your view, Steve, on rewilding as a concept? And I do have another question after that, but it'll be very brief.
So it's a really interesting question, and you probably, even amongst the partnership, will have, you know, individual views on rewilding, you know, and it can be defined quite differently, you know, if depending on who you ask. I mean, some of the work, I mean, the pollinator project is a great example here, and a lot of that isn't necessarily about you know, planting wildflowers and things. A lot of it is about allowing nature to go back to what it wants to do. And you know, and flower, and we manage our verges in a different way, and we manage our roundabouts in a different way, and etc. And my personal view is, I think that's wonderful. I think it's beautiful to see the native species coming back, and actually over time you get some amazing species when you allow nature to look after itself. So we see orchids in places that you wouldn't expect. Got a colleague with orchids in his front garden, you know, who lived in a terrace house in an urban environment. Absolutely amazing to see, or suburban environment. So you know, but rewilding on larger scale is complicated. It's challenging. You know, there is a tendency now to see when we fell trees, for instance, and that is difficult because it is done on an industrial scale, and it has to be done because you need to comply with statutory plant health notices that are served on coops of trees. You know, you have to remove trees in a certain period of time once the notice has been served upon them. But what we like to try and do is to see how that area naturally regenerates. So give it a few years, see what it's starting to look like, and you can get quite an early indication, particularly from plant species, around what it might look like if you then leave it completely. That's kind of rewilding, and I think, you know, that is certainly encouraged as part of, so natural regeneration is a part of restocking policies, and you know, and that you know, a number of partners sort of utilize. So, you know, beyond that, of course, then you start to, you know, have the conversations around introducing new species, or what, you know, what were native species. You know, do we want wolves? Do we want beavers? Do we want, you know, that kind of thing? And so do we give rewilding a helping hand? So, I mean, you know, I've got personal views on this, but that's not relevant for this session, and other partners will have as well. But to try and come up with a collaborative kind of view and a cohesive sort of plan for Newport, that's really interesting. And I think alongside some of the, you know, the individual projects that actually I think are examples of rewilding, part of the work we want to do based on what I said the focus was for Q2 around making sure that we have the evidence-based information we need to make the right decisions. I think that's something we could be quite creative about in Newport as we continue to develop the green and safe spaces interventions. So I don't know, I probably haven't answered your question in terms of what's my view on it, but I need to be careful about sharing but my because, you know, it's quite a complicated area, but a really interesting area.
And I suppose it's a similar topic. The Welsh government and in England is different, have policies of giving trees away, you know, getting people to plant trees. I live in a semi-rural area, and a lot of residents are saying, you know, how do we go about, you know, repopulating, you know, with trees? Where can we put them? You know, common land, etc., etc. So again, it might be a long conversation, so I don't want to drag the meeting on. But do you have any brief thoughts on that? You know, in terms of the Welsh government initiatives for making trees available for people?
Yeah, I think, Mike, the short answer for me would be there are a number of initiatives that can support and provide trees for free. I think along with those, I think we need to try and bring those various initiatives together and provide good advice, or better advice, perhaps integrated advice in terms of, you know, how best we can develop those kind of opportunities. So bring together, because we don't want to just, you know, stop any of these initiatives, because they're great and there are a number of them, and we could go into some of the detail on those, you know, at another time perhaps. But actually trying to bring those initiatives together in a more cohesive way, I think there's a good opportunity to do that, provide better perhaps guidance, signpost to where those opportunities are, and support communities that want to do that sort of replanting, and families that want to do that replanting. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity. I think the important thing is that we try and emulate in doing that what the natural environment, our native environment, would look like in Wales. So it needs to be carefully managed as well. So I think good signposting and good information would support those initiatives that are there now.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tom. I think you want to come back in.
Thank you, Chair. It's just this to ask the question. It seems to be you, Steve. You seem to be working well with the other partners. Is that the fact?
So yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. I've said this before, and I always feel a bit guilty about saying it because I'm involved in other partnerships outside of Newport as well. But there is something really special about this, you know, the Newport PSB and now the Newport partnership, local partnership. It really feels collaborative. The interventions are overlapping. You heard what Will said earlier on. Some of the work that Steve's talked about around volunteering, green volunteering. You know, that it is. My personal view is I've not seen another example of collaboration and overlapping of interventions and working together anywhere else. And I do sit on a number of other, I have sat on a number of other PSBs and I sit on other partnerships. I've said that, I've said it in this forum, I mean it, and I think there's a lot that others can learn from the way we do it in Newport, but I don't exaggerate how strong that partnership is. And you know, a lot of that, and I know, I mean, Tracy and Nicola are on the call today, the support we get as a PSB and the encouragement and the support we get to work in partnership is provided as well, very ably and really helpfully by the PSB administration sort of team as well. So, you know, I think commend Tracy and Nicola for the support they offer us there as well.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you both. I don't see any further questions, so thank you, Steve, on that one. I'm keen with the time, obviously, with members and also the visitors, officers, obviously holding on as well there. If we can move to sustainable travel, please, on there, and it'll be the last of this report, please.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Can you, yeah, you can see me, can you?
Yeah, we can, Craig, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Craig Lane. I'm the Chief Executive at Newport Citizens Advice. Also chair the Third Sector Partnership and joint lead on the Sustainable Travel Intervention. Improving sustainable travel opportunities and reducing traffic congestion, you know, has obviously got long-term benefits for health and well-being for both now and for future generations. Contributes to improvement of air quality, reducing carbon emissions. And you know, helps to mitigate mitigate climate change. Also improving active travel will also reduce traffic congestion, which has health benefits, as does active travel having health benefits. So again, there are crossovers with a lot of the other interventions in the work that this one does. The sustainable travel intervention has three key priority areas. First is that we enable and support the PSB and its members to become champions of sustainable travel. Secondly, that we're working to create an environment where public transport, walking and cycling is prioritised. And thirdly is encouraging the use of ultra low emission vehicles. There's quite a few examples of the work and the progress that's been made across all of those areas. On the becoming champions of sustainable travel, the Gwent Healthy Travel Charter was launched in November 2020, now has 23 organisations signed up. There are also plans which I'm keen to work with as well on developing a third sector version of that to enable the third sector organisations to contribute and be part of that with their workforces and the people they support. Creating an environment where public transport, walking and cycling is prioritised, there initiatives such as the School Streets project, which is 3 schools are involved in the pilot for that at the moment, which is Tredegar Park Primary, Amalthus Church and St Joseph's, which is about, you know, encouraging or discouraging use of vehicles and creating safer and more sustainable spaces around schools and better school transport habits. There's been work to develop the active travel network map, which after multiple rounds of consultation, and this will be used to plan active travel development in the future. The map, you know, there's a map and routes covering, I think it's available online, and it covers the various routes across Newport. We have been keen to, you know, talking as a board on the need to take advantage of the behaviour change that has been encouraged by the pandemic in terms of reduced private car use and increased active travel. So we did hold a stakeholder workshop in that, and we're looking at finding ways of making sure that change becomes permanent and is embedded in how we work in the future. We've done an active travel public awareness campaign, which has a animated video which has been shared on social media. You'll also you'll all be aware of the bridge, Devon Place, that went into place over Christmas. Not open yet, but clearly work is progressing on that. Other pieces of work like lighting on the shared use routes through Tredegar Park and the golf course, low level lighting that's installed, which doesn't cause light pollution. Also looking in terms of the charging, the guidance is being prepared in relation to installation of on-street residential chargers, so the rollout is safe and consistent across the city. And mapping underway to identify the areas of the city which have the highest need for on-street chargers. I think what else I wanted to cover on that. I think one of the important things is about the behaviour change and encouraging that. Also being aware that we need to encourage active travel, but also be mindful of the fact that not everybody can participate equally in active travel. That there's another side of the coin, which is accessible public transport and alternatives to less sustainable travel methods. There's also the street bike hire scheme, the on-street bike hire, which I think we are sort of on the verge of trying to get some funding for that. It's taken a while. There are more complexities in Newport around that. They've got a similar scheme in Newport, in Cardiff and the Vale. But Newport's a lot hillier, and so you need electric bikes available, and so there's a larger cost to the infrastructure there. But that's I think some of the funding opportunities that will come out of the M4 Commission to get some money in for that. I think that's a quick scamper through really what we're doing. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Craig. I believe Councillor Whitehead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, it's well put together. Listening to that, and I get your points and I get your aims. But the only thing I'm going to say is obviously the elephant in the room. If any members of the public are watching this, they probably are only actively travelling, because this week in, week out, the service is just not bus-wise. What you say is well intended, but it doesn't seem to be a reality to a lot of people, because of the inertia of the buses themselves. I mean, there is I think the electrification and in the battery operated bus is fantastic. So most things are in place for us to have a great bus service, but unfortunately people's complaints around timetables and stuff saying another story. So so putting something like this together, you have to have a good service in the first place. It'll only work if all the components are turning at the same time. And I don't think, with a hit and miss bus service, which is to some people is quite lamentable. People are missing days in work and whatnot. So it sounds great, and it's massively well intended, but I'm not sure it can work if one part of this machine, then, if you like, if we look at it like that, and if the biggest cog of all is the bus services, and they're not frequent enough and they're not consistent enough, and then people just cannot rely on them. And I have to say that, and I might have gone off a bit awry there, but I'm only speaking to what I'm listening to. I'm sorry to be the bearer of that, but that's what people are saying in the localities. That the bus service it can't altogether work when the biggest part of it is just so infrequent. Sorry about that,
yeah,
Craig. You did speak well.
That's fine. I mean, I think it's sort of important to remember that the availability of the public transport and integrated public transport is sort of outside of the remit of our group to an extent, and has much wider connections with the Cardiff capital region, etc. We are sustainable. Public transport is part of the it's a piece in the jigsaw in encouraging sustainable
I should have
travel.
alluded a bit more to that. Yeah, sorry about that.
And I think it's not included in my update here, but I mean, because it happened post the end of Q2. But I think, you know, for me, I think the introduction of the flexibus scheme should make a significant difference, because that's an on-demand scheme available across Newport to get from anywhere in Newport to anywhere else, which has been supported by Transport for Wales. And we'll take buses to places where they haven't been before. And I know from the early reports we got, they were getting something like 10,000 requests a week for those flexi buses. So that should make quite a significant difference. I mean, it's a pilot, but you know, I hope it can stay. So you know, that I appreciate that you can't have a effective sustainable travel program without effective public transport. Some of it's not within our gift, but we're trying to encourage where it is.
I think I should have maybe pointed that out myself, actually. Sorry about that, Craig. But you're right. But with the flexi, again, I know it's a newfangled edition, and I would still say it's in its trial stage, really. But again, I can only relay the things I see and read. You know, to say it's got teething problems, you know, we need to go to the freezer to get the teething ring out, because it has got teething big time. Thanks, Craig.
It is early days.
Chair, could I ask a question which is related?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, it's to back up what Councillor White has just said, and perhaps I'm not as apologetic as him, because I think there are some serious failings with public transport. Just to pick you up, Craig, you said that, and it's not only you, it's Transport for Wales said that the whole of Newport is covered by flexi. This is not the case. We live on the outskirts of Newport, and there are some serious issues with getting access to flexi buses, and for half of my ward it's impossible. So I'm a bit annoyed that this statement's going round that the whole of Newport's covered. It's misleading. If it's a pilot, then as a pilot scheme, I suppose it's okay. It would be good to see it become a more fair service and cover the whole of the ward. That's my observation. And if you read the South Wales Argus tonight, you will also see that they picked up on that as well. Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't aware it didn't. Yeah, I presented the information I had given to me at the intervention board. I'm not aware that there's limitations in the coverage.
Thank you. And I'm not having a go at you. I'm just trying to put the record straight.
I see Tracy, if you want to come in.
Oral message.
Yeah, I just, from Craig's point of view, who's obviously his lead is Citizens Advice and he's a partner. We are reviewing the performance of the wellbeing plan. So we're slightly off there, but I think the important thing is that partners have recognised that this is a challenge, because we only put things in the wellbeing plan that are a challenge. If they're easy, they don't go in the wellbeing plan because somebody is already doing it. So what is important, I think, is that it's recognised as a challenge and there are a number of partners working together to resolve something that needs to be resolved, which isn't the availability of transport, but more about active travel. So I just wanted to jump in beside Craig there. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Chair. Tracy, can I just acknowledge what you said there? And I think sometimes, going back to what we said earlier on in the conversation, we do tend to go off on a tangent. And I think sometimes, I'll speak for myself, I suppose, we kind of speak as if we hope others are listening. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You know, because poor old Craig, I get what you're saying.
Yes.
You know, I'll get it every day on Betis. The messenger always gets short. It's traditional. But
I'm used to it.
So point taken there, Tracy. You are right, but I think sometimes we speak. And I think it's we speak outwards. We know that we're speaking to people that are polarised, but also I sometimes kind of think I hope others are listening to this, because we kind of having a little, not pop, wrong word, but we hope they're listening to what we're saying, like, you know.
That's right, and there's no challenge that's been said that isn't right, if you know what I mean. But I don't think it's really fair to hold Craig to account on that when we're here to represent what we're doing all of the problems
Yeah.
we're dealing with in the wellbeing plan are really difficult things to fix that aren't really fixed anywhere, and
I
expect
know.
partners working together on that. And I just wanted to jump in with Craig there to say, well, I don't think we
And
can
he
really hold Craig
He
responsible.
looks too friendly and innocent to have a go at. Well done,
I'll
Craig.
get out behind the wheel tomorrow.
Very good. Sorry, Chair. Thank you for bringing me in.
No worries at all. Tom, did you want to come back in? Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You know, we have as councillors, we have a responsibility, and I think Kevin's right. You know, we've got to say how things are, and if Craig didn't know, then he'd be upset that he didn't know the full details. Is that right, Craig?
Yeah, I don't want to blame anybody. I may have had
full details. You know,
facts that I may have misquoted.
No, it's but you were fed wrong. I don't know, but the people in my ward are not happy with some of the DRT buses, and that's a fact, not a criticism. Anyway, thank you, Craig, and thank you, Chair. Thank you.
No problems, both. Now I can see that there's no other hands up that I can see.
Could I just intervene? I've had my hand raised on 2 occasions, and I don't know what's happening, but it doesn't seem to have picked me up.
Please, Malcolm.
Yeah, thank you. I did have it raised on the last speaker, but right. So Craig, Craig, you mentioned about these charging points and the like, and you were looking at in the future, looking at areas in your master plan and where to put them. I feel that they're all well and good in Tesco's and in large areas like that on main roads, but I know of a number, I could give you off the top of my head, where these would be ideally located within a ward, rather than going out on main roads. They're right on the main stretches, but I feel they should be brought within cul-de-sacs and the like. And I know there's small patches of land which could be utilised for these charging points in local areas. And how would we go about if we wanted to bring them into the wards for funding and the like? How do we go about that, and what's your plan on it?
I mean, I think it's still relatively early days on these things, because you know, the accessibility and affordability of the vehicles and the charging is an issue. On street, not everybody has off-street parking where they could use them, and these the charging points are going to be quite key for people being able to, you know, properly use ultra low emission vehicles. I think, you know, at the moment we're at a mapping stage, looking at getting resources in for this. There are issues not only with where you put them, but whether the national grid can sustain them, because that's already been an issue in some parts of Newport. But yeah, I mean, it's something that definitely I'll feed back, that we need to be creative in where these are placed. We need to place them in communities where people can use them accessibly, and it needs to be evenly distributed to where people need them.
Yeah, as I say, this is a partnership board, so we need to speak to City Homes and ourselves and other partners.
They're definitely, well, Kerry is a joint chair as well. So yeah.
And so, yes, I just say I could give you a number off the top of my head now. Okay, well, thank you very much, and hope you bring that forward in the future.
Thank you, colleagues. I don't see any further questions there as it stands. I think, Malcolm, you're on pressing the button further up there, so we'll get onto the point. That's fine. Thank you very much for those on the first agenda point there. I don't think there's any last points that people want to raise or to conclude there. Obviously, before we move on to the next agenda point, I see Reese.
No, just to say thanks very much, committee.
No worries at all. I'm aware we're getting on to the 3 hours now, and I thank committee and members for waiting patiently there in the background. If I can ask, is it Sarah Morgan Price that's going to be introducing the next report, please?
Yes, it is, Councillor Marshall. So good evening, councillors. You'll be very aware that the South East Wales Education Achievement Service are our school improvement partners in Newport. We work in collaboration with them to support and improve our schools across the city. This evening, our EAS colleague, Ed Price, who is the Assistant Director, will describe the headlines of the most recent EAS business plan, which is due to start on April the 1st, 2022, and takes us through to 2025, although there'll be iterations of that plan on an annual basis. This has been developed, as it is every year, in collaboration with Newport Education Service, regional partners, so all of our LAs, head teachers, governor groups, and of course the joint executive group, which also contains our cabinet members from each of the 5 local authorities. We've had numerous opportunities to be able to look at the business plan in these groups and share our thoughts and input into the business planning process to make sure that it suits our needs. So at this stage, I'll pass you over to Ed Price for those headlines. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can see my presentation on screen. I will keep the presentation brief. I won't repeat bits Sarah's covered already, which is excellent as the context. And it hopefully brings some life to our business plan is the intention. And I'll give you more time for questions rather than covering off too much on the presentation. In terms of overview, recently written the business plan. It is a quite significant change from previous business plans in style. It is very much intended to be more accessible than previous versions to a broader range of stakeholders, including parents, and there will also be a learner version as well of the final one. We very much want to be held accountable, and more than happy, as we've done for value for money reports, to return to scrutiny committees such as this to be held to account. Very conscious we've got a role and we are supporting the LA priorities, and as Sarah said, they have been built up in partnership over the autumn, and we very loosely use the theory of change approach to highlight and articulate the changes and impact we want to have. We know that we need to make connections. We know that this is about schools. We know that this is about the context of schools very much emerging from COVID, and it's about the fundamentals of supporting the LA strategic plans and priorities that develop that local need, but that bespoke need in schools as well. The accompanying version, this is a high-level business plan, relatively short in nature, about 15 pages. It is accompanied by detailed in-year delivery plans, which are, in Excel, 600-700 lines of Excel. So there is a lot of detail behind it, and we'll be in a position to report more than we've ever done before to local authorities on that, to replace with some of the inputs, some of the accountability measures that we know have disappeared over the last few years in the direction of, and not just because of COVID, but because of the direction of travel of Welsh Government. One slide I have added onto this, and I will make this slightly amended version available to Neil to distribute to you some initial feedback from other stakeholders, but the key bit about this evening is adding your feedback onto that as part of the consultation process. This slide I'll whiz through. It is about the national strategic aims. It is critical that we base then on the local authority strategic education plans to build our business plan. They are all interlinked and shaped by those internal self-evaluation processes. Forgive this slide for being a little bit messy, but it is important that the work that we do reflects on the current agenda in Newport, on the current priorities, the current strategic priorities that you have. And when I unpick our version of the business plan, you will see that the activities we do are interlinked to it, and the impact that we do are interlinked to your strategic priorities in Newport and elements of other LAs as well, of course. So the consultation, I won't dwell on this because Sarah covered most of this slide, with visioning sessions for the first time with a range of partners to which elected members, governors were invited. The key themes, the key five priorities, you won't be surprised to see that renewal and reform from COVID, clear roles and responsibilities of working in partnership, that vision for recovery, and that practical help of identifying and supporting local authorities to share the best practice within and outside the region as well, and shaping the future. And then that underlying key criteria that we need, that investment in leadership, including governance. I won't cover all of this slide, but it's some of the key points that we've had from the various consultation groups that you can see about clear vision, clear ethos, shared regional vision, supportive accountability, knowing our schools well, working alongside our schools with support, and our alignment to support as the default setting, but with more challenge when and where it is required. One of the things that we've talked about in consultation with Sarah and colleagues and other directors is the idea of a regional vision sitting above the AS vision. This may not come to fruition yet, but it's something, a concept that we've all agreed to explore to see if there are common priorities, and there are, but can they be expressed in that way across the South East Wales region, sitting above what's on the next slide, an EAS vision, and that core role of ours is supporting and enabling schools and education settings to thrive as learning organisations. We're doing more work with stakeholders to evolve this vision as well to reflect the business plan. So this is a slide that shows the heart of what we're doing. In terms of the 5 areas, I'm not going to dwell on them because you'll be familiar with them, and they're described in detail in section 4 of the business plan at a high level of the 5 areas in which we work of school improvement, leadership in teaching, curriculum for Wales, health, wellbeing and equity, heavily linked to the work of ALN and with our colleagues in the local authority, and the work of school governors that underpins that. In terms of the layers then, there is a universal provision for all schools described diagrammatically in the document, with a set number of days with a school improvement partner. You'll notice the change of terminology there from challenge advisors to school improvement partners as we change ways of working. That universal offer on things like curriculum for Wales, open to all schools, wellbeing, open to all schools, well, all areas open to all schools, but we know that other schools need more specific and targeted support that helps them specifically align to their school development plans and their areas for development. And then as well, there are a layer of schools who may well need bespoke support, supported by the learning network schools, supported by school improvement partners to direct and get support possibly from local authority colleagues in areas as well, but our own support through the business plan for those who need that intensive support. So those 3 layers, which are unpicked on in section 4. That describes the 5 high areas for 3 years at a high level. I've talked about them at a high level. You've had a chance to read about them within the business plan, so I'm not going to talk about the detail of those. They are firmly putting clearly the areas of that we will be working in according to our CAMA and according to our agreements and according to the specification with which we work, which has been set down. I will talk a little bit more about impact, because I think this is important, that as we've moved from a position where accountability arrangements were all about GCSE results, A-level results, end of key stage results in our primary schools, as we move away from that with new curriculum, changes to examinations, we're going to have less and less data on that. And we are in the process with colleagues in LAs of evolving an impact capture model that doesn't just capture the inputs that we give to schools collectively with our colleagues in local authorities, but also captures the progress and impact that has over time. You know, if a teacher attends this course, what's the impact X at 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, a year down the line, and what's that aggregated impact across all our schools, evolving those models, making that data available on a Newport basis for entry into scrutiny processes like this, but also making it available to our accountability process where you have members represented. So that's an evolving piece of work, which I'll touch on the last slide. I'll cover the diagram on the right hand side here, but we're looking at our service self-evaluation, a process but report at the end of the year, at the end of each business plan, informing the service detailed delivery plans. That impact capture process we're evolving across the South East Wales region with colleagues. The FADE reports, apologies for the acronym. I even forget what the acronym actually stands for these days. We've been using them so long and they've evolved, but they are an evaluative report at a service level, succinct, 6 to 8 pages, clear criteria there that feed our service evaluative report, and those made available to local authority officers as well. And then some of the outputs, I won't go through all of those, but I would say we are committed to increasing the range of case studies. We've done case studies for a number of years, but we haven't made them sufficiently available into scrutiny processes, so you as members know the success stories that are happening within Newport, the schools that are making progress where they need to, the schools that are supporting others with some of the best practice in the region, more and more of those case studies. And as we're going to term it, stats and stories. So giving you some statistics on the impact, but the stories that back that up as well and bring that to life. The foundations, I'm only going to cover briefly to give more time for questioning, but I think some of the key bits there on the second and third bullet points are being agile, timely in what we do, and responsive. This is a 3-year business plan, but it's a 1-year detailed business plan, and we know we've been able to change things around our circumstances require. We're well aware that at the moment, as schools emerge from the pandemic, some of the abilities, as there are staffing issues, to engage with professional learning may not be there, and we realign the provision. We record everything we do, as an example, with online provision, so it's accessible anytime for the staff that want to engage with that, who may not have the time because they're focused on pandemic recovery in other ways, just as one example. So that flexibility. Some of the assumptions is about some of the partnerships that we have. These assumptions could easily be termed risks when you look at the previous report and the management's there, but that partners and all partners understand our role, and we understand the role of partners, and that very much includes governors and school leaders there. That professional learning has a positive impact on practice and behaviour. We are well aware that the people who are actually influencing our learners and the outcomes are those staff in schools, and we as the LA and we as the EAS and local authority colleagues are influencing those practitioners. So we need to work through those, and we need to get them to engage positively with us, and where they're not engaged, we'll work with partners in the local authority to further encourage and secure that engagement, and obviously the capacity and resources to undertake that work. I won't cover the rest of those. This is quite a busy slide, but the whole detail is in the whole plan. It's trying to capture exactly what we will do on a page of A4. But that was the challenge to us set by a consultant who did some work with us on the business plan, looking down from the vision, the impact, the outputs that were produced, the key activities there that are described in the business plan and the report, and then those underpinning assumptions and foundations on the right, trying to capture it in a more succinct way. We are contributing to the overall vision if and when developed. We're very much aiming for our vision in terms of that supporting and enabling schools and education settings to thrive as effective learning organisations linked to SLO and schools as learning organisations, the Welsh Government's agenda for change there, and reporting against the impact, but you'll be pleased to hear we won't be reporting against just those high-level statements. We will unpick those with the detailed delivery plan for much more of those stats and stories that we can publish and give you the data that you require, which isn't based on targets because those Welsh Government targets aren't there, but in terms of the KPIs on many of the things that we were used to, but on the statistics and data we believe has an impact based on global research on classroom practice and children's learning. So again, I won't cover this because it's just an example, but section 4 for the detail of the business plan is available to you on those 3 tiers of what we will do at the universal layer and provision for all schools, what we will do in terms of targeted provision for that additional support for schools, and then that bespoke provision for schools that need more intensive support over longer periods of time in each of the 5 areas at a high level, and those will be supported by a much more granular approach in the detailed business plan. But we wanted to keep this accessible as we could for all stakeholders, including parents and in the learner version learners. Final couple of slides is some early feedback from key stakeholders, which I'm sure you'll want to add to, but one of those from some of the scrutiny committees we've gone to already is a request for further detail on measuring impact, and we've committed to developing those 4 high-level impact statements with more detail to develop specific success criteria against each of the bullet points you see in section 4. We will then build on the existing structures that work incredibly effectively in partnership with Newport officers, such as the monthly partnership meetings, the LA termly overviews, to share that information on a termly basis, so it's not just at the end of the year, developing an increasing range of case studies which are able to inform the range of scrutiny reports we offer you already, but making those more and more bespoke to LAs, and informing our own EAS governance reports so that the councillors who represent you on those are better informed. The second one, just quickly, is we were trying to move on from COVID and post-COVID recovery perhaps a little bit too quickly, and some of the members felt that we need to strengthen our acknowledgement of that and the challenges to schools as the second part, and then the final bit was about the accessibility of language for all, and we're going to work with some external partners to review the language. In terms of consultation, process ends on the 11th of February. Happy to take any questions or comments and feedback now, or receive that in writing through your committee services at by that date. Diolch yn fawr iawn, pawb.
Thank you very much there, Ed, for that. And I don't see any members at first, but can I ask if members wish to raise a point or comments, please?
Not from me, Chair.
No.
I'm fine, Chair, thank you.
Okay.
Hello, Chair. I'd like just like to say keep up the good work. That's all. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, so I think obviously in that, Ed, I think you mentioned quite a lot of stuff already, and I think because we've asked a lot of questions in previous years similar, I think somewhat colleagues are somewhat happy. I do have some myself, as I usually come across, as you probably know by now. But it's just more the fact of engagement mostly with youth voices or learner voices. I think it was page 31 in the pack that I've got there of section 1.14, just about what type of thing are you doing to encourage the learner voices, you know, in that side. How is it allowing you to adapt and change how the partnership works, and has there been anything that has been changed or adapted because of that learner voice being included?
Colleague of mine, Assistant Director Kath Bevan, who looks after our wellbeing strategies, has been liaising with a number of school councils, offering the version 4 feedback, and we've undertaken that exercise. Haven't seen the feedback from that yet, but I can assure you that it will be incorporated into the final version, and it will also be published with the final version as well in one of the appendices, as we do for all feedback.
That's brilliant, thank you. Obviously there was mention about the challenges of staffing. Now I know obviously the ES has changed from being an external kind of, accepting external businesses type thing, that side. I can't remember the official term of it, but then moving back into just generally be for the education service in this side and doing the focus of what you're currently focusing on, if that makes sense in that way. How are you experiencing kind of trying to put this plan into motion with the reduction of staff, or has that been incorporated in terms of the new styles of working? Now I know last year you mentioned about the new ways of governors working, and new ways are obviously moving forward. Just seeing how that's progressing / has that been adapted because of these changes?
We are in a stage where we had a minor restructure last year with staffing. We take advantage and opportunities as well where we have with staffing. The one point which does relate to your question, it's 3.4 in the report. We have always passed on efficiency savings to the local authority. I do have my finance director in the meeting as well. He was possibly having trouble with camera earlier, but I think I can answer the question because it does relate to finance. Is that we're at a stage where we've successfully managed that transition down so far, but we may be at a point where any further efficiency savings at the core are going to become more and more challenging in future years. There's only so far you can go with that. But in terms of the model, we are firmly committed to the model of partner school improvement partners, who are the best of our head teachers, the best of our learning network schools, and we monitor and broker their support, set the objectives for them for what they're achieving with the core team. It is similar in governance, where we have a smaller team managing the centre in governance and a more flexible pool of casual clerks, and we feel that model is effective and offers efficiency savings into the system as well, both for schools and local authorities.
Thank you, Ed. And it's one of the challenges, but especially during the COVID situation, about the free school meals, the FSM students. What have you been looking at, and also within this, looking at how you work with that challenge in that partnership together between obviously the local authority and local authorities and yourself?
Yeah, you may expect it to be heavily embedded in the wellbeing area with free school meals, but it's embedded in all areas that learners and, well, many groups of learners, but particularly groups of learners with free school meals and socioeconomic disadvantage, are a priority within the plan. They will be a priority in the reporting metrics where we're able to get them as well. We know that it's had the greatest impact, and I'm sure colleagues in the local authority would reflect on that as well, that it has had the greatest impact on the most socioeconomically disadvantaged. All our strategies have elements of ensuring that schools, teachers, classroom teachers focus on those learners. We know that the schools that focus on those learners actually do well for all learners as a byproduct of that. It's not at the expense of the rest. It helps the rest as well.
Thank you. And I think I'm starting to run out of questions. Maybe that's always good. But I think that the last one for me is about the recent educational law changes in Wales about those with disabilities or those with special educational needs. Has that had any bearing the way that you work in partnership, and if so, how?
Hi, Sarah.
This is a partnership approach, Councillor Marshall. So the local authority is the lead on ALN transformation and has a head of inclusion and a team that would lead schools through those transformational changes. However, EAS partners also dovetail into that strategy. For instance, when we look at the good quality teaching and learning, part of good quality teaching and learning is looking at differentiation and setting appropriate challenges for pupils. And so our EAS partners are supporting us with that aspect, as an example.
That's great, thank you. It's just a load of the fields looking about how that partnership works and about how that progresses forward. And just the kind of last one, I think it's basically about, have there been any challenges in the last kind of 12 months there, looking at obviously coming into where we are in hopeful recovery from COVID, into the business plan that you're putting forward. Is there any challenges that were foreseen and then basically looked and adapted? Is there anything that you can give us about that good working relationship that you have, or has there been, you know, anything that you can't iron out, but then you've left it to say, well, this is the way we are, but we agree to that?
Do you want me to go first, Sarah, on that? From our perspective, I think one of the greatest challenges, and it happened probably last autumn, the previous autumn, and possibly the autumn before as well, where with some of the waves of COVID, we had made assumptions that we were ready to drive forward with the school improvement agenda, but we did that at a stage where schools were perhaps not at those stages ready. They were facing the challenges of staffing, cases in schools. I think now we've emerged from that with much stronger antennae, if that makes sense, and much stronger avenues to be able to listen to our head teachers in virtual means at very short notice, to take regular temperature checks. And I'm sure the local authority work in this way as well, that you've got your antenna and radar there ready for the challenges, because we were caught out at one stage with perhaps pressing on when others weren't ready. The partnerships are now strengthened because of it.
I would just add, Councillor Marshall, that during the pandemic, the EAS and local authority maximised their work with schools where possible. And for instance, the EAS put on professional learning led by Dr. Simon Breakspear, who specifically focuses on leadership change and adapting in challenging circumstances. And we met with the majority of our schools through a CSSR approach, which means we celebrate, share, success and refine. It's about what we learn from that period, that chapter of education, what will we retain as part of it, so we're building on success, and what will we leave behind. Some things we won't be doing the same as we did before the pandemic, and that in itself has provided a fantastic springboard for all of us to be able to take those successes with us and, as I said, leave some things behind, and provided fantastic self-evaluation for all of the collaboration, schools, EAS and the local authority.
Thank you both, and I think that goes to show as well with the increasing of schools and that utilising the services of EAS as well from the look of the report and moving forward. So I think that's definitely something that shows that good partnership that you hold between each other as a local authority, as EAS, and a big thank you, obviously, for presenting and stuff, and the good relationship. It does definitely shine through, I can only say sorry for the fact that we made you wait for a long while there. I think it's a very full but very interesting meeting all round, and just a sign of good partnerships all round, which you're definitely a part of. So thank you for your time this evening. I very much appreciate that. I'm not sure if colleagues want the last quick get in at all. Are there any last points or like comments at all?
Just well done, Chair. I think just keep the good work up, and we'll still. Well, I won't be scrutinising. This is my last scrutiny meeting, so thank you very much for all you've said to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Ed, I think you were trying to come in there, but I think you were on mute, were you?
I was, sorry. Very briefly, the link I've put in the chat is to the workshop that Simon Breakspear did for governors last year, which references the work that Sarah mentioned.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, and I extend that thank you again to all of you, that's including the officers and staff in the organisation. So thank you very much, and thank you for obviously your wait patiently tonight there. Thank you. Okay, if we move on to the conclusions there, colleagues. If I can ask Neil, if you want to come in, or Callum to remind us of points that you've kind of clocked already.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Chair. I've got on here Councillor Linton's query about the new developments in the hub and the startup fees. Will Beer was going to look into that, and you suggested to have a bigger look at all the Newport, what things have been done. Looking at the numbers which are coming in June in regard to needs, so I'll chase that up as well. So when we have that report in June, I'll ensure that we can send this to all members. Your comment, Chair, about recognising the hard work of volunteers. Councillor Suller's query about if there's any chance of us liaising with the Welsh Assembly about the road to nowhere, about turning that site into a nature reserve, which Steve said he would take on board. And also Councillor Linton's suggestion about the charging points for the electric cars. So was there anything that I've missed, or is there anything further that members would like me to include with these comments?
Thank you, Neil, for picking my points up.
Thank you. Cheers, Chair.
I think all that is action, but I think it's just a sign, obviously, with the work and commitment done. I think it just goes to show the good partnership around it, and the fact that there is some parts of the interventions that cross over, but there's not kind of like stepping on toes. It's more the fact that where they fit in naturally, like we saw with the Newport offer and the green side of things there, they've naturally fit in, and if it fits in a different one a little bit better, then so be it, to avoid that duplication and good partnership working. So definitely I think should be commended.
I think you're right. you're right, Chair. Yes, they're working well together. Yeah, well done. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Chair. And is there any comments or feedback that the committee would like to take back in regards to the EAS business plan?
I think on a personal level, colleagues, I think if you agree, the business plan this year seemed to read a lot better, and it seemed to kind of get us a bit more about what expectations we were looking for, what we wanted as that. But I think because we've seen them in partnership a few times and grasp, we've got a good knowledge of who they are. I think that would be a lot different. Obviously, if we came into this fresh, and the fact that we know the partnership, we see it, quite well. The fact that we didn't have to kind of question too much out of them, if you will, but just to make sure that the partnership is still healthy.
Yeah. So, Chair, yeah.
Is there any other comments the committee would like to make, or is that sufficient?
Don't think so, Chair. Not me, anyway. I think we've fully covered it. I think just as long as they keep working together,
To just keep us appraised of any changes, really, anything that they believe that we should know, any changes in structure or points or key things like that there, just to make sure that we're keeping on top of it, that we know of any changes in case we, the next time that we see them, obviously we can pick them up and know of the change.
Thanks very much, Chair. I won't include it in the comments, but just for reference and for the future draft annual work programmes, what we could do in future to ensure that members aren't waiting for a long time, because the Q2 performance was quite long this year. Perhaps what we could do is make sure the Q2 performance is on a separate agenda, so it's just a single item agenda.
I think we could maybe ask the main speakers, for like a summary of 5 or like 7 minutes, whatever it might be, to put all their main key points in that, because I think, like, even though it's great, what they say verbally, I think there was quite a lot in some of them and a very small amount in others, and I think just to balance it round a bit more.
Yeah.
I take that. Thanks very much, Chair. Okay, the only other thing, Chair, from me is the action plan from the last meeting on the 20th of January. We've sent the comments and recommendations for the Gwent local assessment of wellbeing consultation, and also for the regional population needs assessment. Everything is being sent over. I'm just waiting for confirmation from the leader in regards to the Dementia Friends online training session, which is taking place on the 9th of February. So as soon as we get authorisation, we can send our link out to members to join.
That's great. Thank you, Neil. I think that's everything then. Yeah, on that point. Yep, thank you very much for yourself and for the team as well, Neil, for tonight as well. I know it's been a little bit of a long one, but thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much, Chair. Thanks for taking over today. Appreciate that.
And thank you, Stephen. That was the last partnerships scrutiny committee.
We don't have tea or cake, Tom. We'll definitely have a catch up on that side of things. Never a stranger, as they say.
No, but I